Okay, and we're streaming. Well, today is a special broadcast, a little bit extra, because it's actually Wednesday instead of my standard Saturday, and that's because I believe the viewer is already waiting in the chat. I don't know how often they'll chat, but this is a music stream for Miss Fish, Miss Little Fish. And so that's mostly what I'm going to focus on today, is talking about music production stuff and all that. And I've prepared, and Miss Fish is here under Meg's Music, which makes me assume if you've got a YouTube channel name like that, means you must have some stuff available on YouTube, which maybe we should check out. Should prod to see what you've posted. I've checked out your SoundCloud, but it looks not frequently used, much like my own SoundCloud. Miss Fish, Meg, whatever works. I don't care about names too much. Whatever you prefer, I'll use. So, all right. So, yeah, I'm gonna give you a chance to ask questions, but I've also prepared a lot to talk about because I was kind of excited about this stream. In fact, this may sound a little bit funny. I'm actually, this is probably the first stream ever that I've actually felt almost a little bit nervous about. I was kind of had to get up the nerves before going on stream, making sure I'm ready. I don't know why. I guess it's just because this is a little bit different than what I normally do. But I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation here. Number one, today's plan. This outline, which we're looking at right now. Then we're going to talk about Hayato Asano, Blue Reflections, and listening to music. I think hopefully this section will be pretty short. The building blocks and the EDM clap. Which actually is kind of more of a bonus. I do think it's kind of important, but it's also kind of not important when it comes to... I brought a notebook. Okay, good. Well then, I'm glad I prepared this. Anyway, so the EDM clap is like not really something you need to know, but it's something I wanted to talk about. So, theming, the motif, we're going to get an idea of... what we're going to be listening to today. Let's listen. So we will listen to the song. Then we're going to look at the project file itself. And from there, this is kind of just a mess. Most of all the points here are things that I want to remember to talk about, but it could be more than this. It could also be less than this, and there's no order to it. I want to talk about ghosting, layering, EQ smoothing, OTT, multi-stage compression, monopanned bass, and -1 decibel limiting. So hopefully we get through all of those. I think all of those concepts are actually pretty easy, and potentially you may already know them, but also that's why you're here, is that if you do know these things, then you can ask me questions about things that you don't know. And I should also say, I don't know everything. Mostly, as I've mentioned before, is I've had a lot of years of experience, but all of that years of experience has mostly been self-taught. So it's not like I had any formal education in this. So I don't have the answer to everything. So that's it. Pretty short slideshow. So first thing is that I wanted to talk about Hayato Asano, Blue Reflections, and listening to music. This is mostly not really for you, Meg, but for anyone else who might be watching. Is I think it's really important if you if you're working on anything artistic. It doesn't matter if it's music, if you're making a game or making art or whatever. You should really appreciate a wide range of whatever medium you are trying to create, whether it's games or music, etc. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is like one of the huge inspirations for my soundtrack, which comes from another soundtrack composer, which is Hayato Asano. This is not the first time I've mentioned Blue Reflections on this channel, and it probably won't be the last time I will mention Blue Reflections on this channel, but I like Blue Reflections. It is without argument a very B-tier JRPG. It has a lot of problems with it, but for whatever reason, I love this game, and a huge part of the reason why I love it is because the music is just fucking great. Now, I would love to show off tons and tons of this soundtrack. As you can already see, I have queued up a lot. We're not going to listen to all of them. These are all just like the combat songs, and that's because the song that I want to look at today, the project file, is a combat song. The reason I picked it is because it has kind of the most production value going on in it. A lot of my more jazzy stuff is more gentle with the types of production that goes into it, mixing and mastering and all that. It's usually pretty gentle, so I picked a song that has, you know, a lot of the mixing and mastering and fancy production stuff going on. So I wanted to kind of just take a listen to some of these, particularly the boss songs in Blue Reflections. The first game had so many more bosses, and it was so cool. They had like these major bosses that were like huge events in the game, and all of the bosses would have 3 stages, and it'd have this dynamic music that would go through like 3 different versions of the song. Super cool. Really, really sucks that they got rid of that in the second game. But anyways, I kind of think in general the first game had the better music, but anyways, that's beside the point. So I wanted to listen to a couple of these real fast, just to kind of get an idea. So you can kind of hear how these influenced my music. There's sort of a combination of, you have little like sparkly synths, then kind of some like dubsteppy kind of stuff in there. So it's like this harsh electronic mixed with some lighter kind of trance stuff. And outside of the combat, there's kind of some more like jazzy ambient stuff, but we're not going to be listening to that. So for example, let's start with, the thing is, none of these names mean anything to me. I think this might be the more interesting one. It's not. But I love those fucking drums, man. So that you have this really bright, sparkly synth come in. And the dubstep-like stuff. So, one thing I want to point out about this piano that you hear is that this is a motif that is played throughout basically the entire game. The main theme is just this piano theme, and they've taken that theme and just transferred it in all of the songs. And I love that kind of theming. That leitmotif, I think, is the proper term for it. So let's switch songs. I also don't know if this kind of stuff is going to get me, because Japanese artists or music is like the games, all of it, it's sometimes weird with Content ID. They register it with Content ID, even though it's like game music, which is rarely registered with Content ID. So I don't know if this is going to cause problems. I should have checked before the stream, but I didn't. Anyways, let's switch over to another one. I think it picks up here. Yeah. Yeah, leitmotif. I usually just call it theming because, you know, I'm a pleb when it comes to musical terms. But yeah, it's something I love in soundtracks, and I think it's one thing why this soundtrack really resonates with me, because the leitmotif that they use, like the main theme of the game, it's really good. I'm gonna sound like a fucking nerd, but like when it's played by itself just on the piano, I almost kind of just want to cry. It's just like, it's so beautiful. I really love it. Just one reason why I really love the second soundtrack, I'm not going to be showing it off, but like, you kind of like revisit one of the areas of the first game, and they took that leitmotif of the first game and just jazzed it up. And it's so cool when that first came in. I was just like, just like super nerd. But anyways, so you kind of get the idea of the feeling here. Here's some of the second game soundtrack. Let me quickly listen to that real fast before we move on. I don't want to linger on this too much. You'll hear the leitmotif here. I'm talking over it. There it is. We get that nice big sound. And I'm going to be talking about how to do that nice big sound. I also love this rhythm right here. It's got like this oh god, what's the word? It's completely slipped my... It's like got this polyrhythm kind of vibe to it. It's very like, what is it? I can't think of the word, but it feels kind of almost like asynchronous to the beat. And it's really fucking really cool. I love it. There it is. Thank you. Alright, so anyways, so we kind of got an idea. This is a soundtrack that I absolutely love. It has influenced a lot of my current soundtrack. In fact, there is a small little Easter egg in my game that actually basically is just shows my appreciation for Hayato Asano's work on this soundtrack. But of course, my one of my points is to, you know, kind of talk about leitmotif and all of that stuff, of course, but also to the other people who may be watching, is to just remember, listen to music, listen to lots of music. I think probably I have more soundtracks in my music folder than, you know, albums. That might not be entirely true, but it's probably pretty close. If we bring that over here, you can see all these are marked with OST, and it's just what I listen to a lot. I listen to a lot of soundtracks, so... Alright, so what was the next thing on the list? I kind of forgot. The building blocks, the EDM clap. Okay, so, I've actually kind of got this in order here. So the EDM clap is, the thing is, when it comes to, especially with electronic music, sometimes your regular crash cymbals just kind of don't work very well. Let's admit to the fact that crash cymbals are overused as a nice transition to things. This is something I had actually put into my own music. I'm not the first person to do this, though. But basically, I wanted a nice big transition that's kind of like a, you know, a nice but not a cymbal. So I use the EDM clap. Now keep in mind, like I said, this thing is kind of bonus for this video. That's it. There should be a second time. All right, there it is. So, yeah. Hello, Priska. Nice to have you here. We're talking music today. So, this clap, pretty simple, just a nice spacey, right? So, basically, you've probably heard something similar in a lot of EDM before. I had actually started using this in my album that I had released back in 2021. In this song right here. I'm gonna go ahead and warn you right now. This is a heavy and loud song, so, you know, like, hold on to your britches. You should be able to hear the clap now. Right? So, but later on you hear it a lot more clearly, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. There it is. Right? Okay, so, basically, I just want to... And let me indulge myself, okay? This is not that important to the music, but I wanted to talk about this because I use it a lot in my music. So basically, I started sampling my own self. And I've started using that sound specifically a lot in my own soundtrack. And don't you worry, by you letting me indulge myself talking about this nonsense that is not entirely related to music production, I'm giving you the gift of downloading the sample of this. I'm going to be putting, like, all the assets and stuff. I'll probably give you the link afterwards because it's not in the description. But anyways, I'll give you the link later and you'll get everything that everything I can give you that I talk about here. Obviously, I can't give you the soundtrack to Blue Reflection. Anyways, so, here, like in this song, we can hear that clap being used again. And this is part of my current soundtrack. I think it's here. It's not, actually. Is it not in this song? There it was. Right there. Right? And then the next one, really easy. It starts with the clap. There it is. It's a good clap. I don't know if it comes up again. Maybe right here? No. Anyways, you get the idea. Thanks for letting me indulge in that. The point is the point is that I use that clap a lot. Let's see, if I bought one of your music packs on Bandcamp, can I use it in my games? That's not really buying a license for use in games. That's just buying it to listen to. However, I mean, if your games are just being published for free, I have no problem. I also don't register any of my music with the Content ID system. I really think, obviously, there are bad actors out there who might take music and upload it against the author's wish and, like, profit off of it. But I generally like to believe that most people just want to use the music because they like it. They're not trying to do anything. They don't have any ill will. So, like, none of my music is registered with the Content ID system. However, with that being said, Pariska, obviously none of my current soundtrack is available. And even if it was, that would not be usable in your game because that's my game soundtrack. Not your game. However, things like Believe is available. I think it's under Nephilim. Yeah. So if you go to nephilimnovel.bandcamp.com, there's all my albums there. I'm gonna rag on my own music here and say you probably don't want to use Huyu. The katakana's wrong here. It's do se labu. It should be do say love. Sparkle, everything always. You probably don't want to use those. These are all Vocaloid songs, and they're utter nonsense. If anyone who can speak Japanese listens to these songs, they will be laughing the entire time because it is nonsense, literally nonsense. Anyways, but Believe is here. You're welcome to purchase it, and you can use any of the songs featured in Believe. If your game is free, if your game is commercial, I don't know, message me and we'll talk about things, see what works best. Anyways, let's move on. So next thing on the list is theming the motif, the leitmotif. So, okay, so we've already talked a little bit about leitmotif. So now let's kind of establish my own game's leitmotif. So here, we're going to listen to the main title theme of my game. Yeah. Yeah, I think I like brush kits too. It took me a while to find a good brush kit. I think this one is Fluffy Audio's brushed. It's definitely Fluffy Audio, but I don't remember the name of the kit, like Brushed Drums or something. It's something pretty obvious like that. Yeah, so this theme has actually been something that I have had for a really, really long time. Like any standard RPG Maker dev. I have dreams of a bigger, greater game out there, and putting the cart before the horse. A long time ago, after I finished my Believe album, I'd actually started kind of getting the concept for the game I wanted to make, and not being an artist, a visual artist, being completely incapable of drawing anything. I decided that I wanted to visualize the world that I was creating by using music. So I spent a long time trying to come up with a good theme, and eventually what I had settled on was this. So this is kind of like the draft, I guess you could say, of that song. I honestly haven't used any of the Abbey Roads kits, but I really liked Fluffy Audio's brush kits because it has a lot of nice control over the drums. So this was definitely just like a demo for the leitmotif itself. So it's really not much more than just repeating that section. One thing I did want for that game, and I had kind of tried to do with my current game, is I really kind of liked I have a soft spot for well done sound font instruments. Like, if you listen to things like the Wind Waker soundtrack, the original one, it might surprise you that basically the whole thing's been written with sound fonts. I think that also includes Twilight Princess as well. And, a lot of soundtracks at the time during that era of, like, the GameCube, PlayStation 2, etc., a lot of soundtracks were being written with sound fonts. And the sound fonts sound bad, but if you know how to use them, it can sound really good. And so I originally kind of wanted the soundtrack to kind of have that feel of like a PS2 GameCube kind of vibe. But like the more I started working on my game, the more I don't know, it's like nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It just didn't have any purpose in the soundtrack. It's also kind of hard making sound fonts sound good. Now, don't get me wrong, getting, a string library to sound like real strings is also hard. But I don't know, it's a little bit more fun to work with. I feel like I have more room for expression than dealing with sound fonts with very limited expressions. Very limited articulations. In fact, usually only one articulation. So, anyway, I definitely moved away from that, but that's kind of the cheesy feel that's going on here, is that I have these sound font instruments that's going on, except for the choir. The choir is kind of out of place. But yeah. Yeah. Even still, I'm going to show this off later. When it comes to string libraries, it takes a lot of finagling and masking of the ugliness to get it just right. Yeah. One thing I'm looking forward to is physical modeling. If you don't know who Ben Jordan is, first of all, you should start watching Ben Jordan's stuff. But he just recently did a video about, Ben Jordan. He just recently did a video talking about physical modeling, and yeah, I am excited to get into physical modeling synths. Some of the example synths that he showed off it's just impressive. And to clarify what physical modeling is basically it's a synthesizer, but it's programmed to sound very much like a real instrument. It is modeling a physical instrument. Physical modeling. So anyways, I look forward to the day where I can say goodbye to all the fucking Kontakt libraries. As he points out in the video, like, the only use for Kontakt libraries in the future at this point is for sampling very specific instruments. If you want a very specific tone of, like, a very unique or one-of-a-kind instrument, then of course you'd have sampling. However, if you just need strings and the timbre is not the most important part of that, as long as it's string timbre, then physical modeling is kind of the way to go. So anyways, so we've kind of got an idea of what the leitmotif is for my game. We heard it in the main menu theme here. It's a 3/4 piece, which can be heard especially here because 3/4 is well known for that kind of waltz. Right? So you can definitely feel that waltzy feel in this song. The main theme is not quite as forward. But it's still there. So we can also see that I have later, like, put that in other songs as well, like here. I use a disgusting amount of 3/4. I didn't use much 3/4 until I started writing this soundtrack. In fact, actually, before this soundtrack, I didn't play around too much with time signatures, except in Believe. Where's Believe? Of course, we need to go to the single years. Why don't I just go to my music folder? The Nephilim novel. Yeah, so I will say in this song, I pulled... Actually, you know what? I played around a lot with time signatures in this album. I totally forgot about that. Well, I'm not gonna, since the album is not the point of this stream, we're not gonna talk about all of them, but I will point out in this one, the first song on the album, it does some wacky 9/8 time switching later. I gotta find it. So it starts out, it's mostly 4/4. Pretty standard 4/4 stuff, right? But so right after the second verse, I guess you could call it, it goes into this 9/8 time kind of like trippy, kind of weird psychedelic section. Here. And then it just goes right back into 4/4. And I think the next song actually was a polyrhythm of... It's a really simple polyrhythm because they're ratios of each other. It's just a 6/4... It's 6/4 melody over 4/4 drums, if I recall correctly, or is it the other way around? I don't remember. But anyways, there's polyrhythm going on in the second song on the album. I think that's it. Maybe the last song does some like time signature change stuff too. But I think that's it for the time signature change. Anyways, like I said, this stream is not about that, so we won't talk too much about that. So, anyways, we've got an idea of the motif that I use in my song. So this is actually good timing. I am out of sake, so I am going to grab a beer. And while I grab that beer, I want you to listen to the song that we are going to be dissecting today. And from there, it just loops back around. So that's the song that we're going to be looking at. And now that we have an idea of what we're looking at today, let's look at the project file itself. This is not it. This is actually the MIDI file. I thought it might be interesting to listen to just the MIDI in standard piano. I removed a lot of the... I used some key switches with my contact libraries. And, of course, those sound pretty ugly if you just play the MIDI raw, because you're going to hear this random really low boom that's, like, out of tune with everything else. And, of course, drums, too, or you're just going to get this really ugly right? So, I just thought it might be interesting to listen to the melody raw as a piano, because oftentimes when it comes to working on music, it starts out as just piano stuff for me. So, you know, this is just the song as a very basic piano. I like that. Anyways, let's look at the project file proper. So here we are in the actual proper project file, and we have a lot that's going on. I also have a lot open on my other screen. I gotta close it out. Let's talk about some of the things first. First, let's talk about the blue track way at the very top. I'm sure you probably are already aware of this, but this is something I hear a lot in the soundtracks that I play a lot of games on on my streams, and whenever someone is touting their own custom soundtrack, this is something I hear them miss a lot, and that is a reverb send. Everything, all of your instruments are going to sound like they are in their own place. So you need something to make it sound like everything is coming from the same auditorium, like the band is in the same room, not in completely separate rooms. So having a verb send helps kind of glue everything together. So here's that. It kind of just sounds like we're listening to, a band play in an auditorium way far away, right? So the way that I have this set up is that I'm routing all of the main mixes into my send here. So like my strings, I have a string folder here. I'm not routing each of the individual strings. I'm too lazy to set up routing for every single string to set it into the send. Instead, I just send the string folder into the send. It's obviously fine. So, and then of course, same thing here. I have a guitar folder as well. I'm just routing the guitar folder itself into the send. I'm not routing the individual guitar tracks into the send. Now, as for the send itself, so one of the things is, when it comes to we're having a okay. Well, don't worry. If power goes out, then there's always the archive to watch, but it would be unfortunate because you wouldn't be able to ask questions. So I guess get your questions in now. So anyways, what was I saying? So one of the things I do with my sends, however, this one's special. I don't normally do this. I don't normally put compression on the send itself, but this is a very loud song, so I put compression on it. Anyways, what I normally do is I do put an EQ on the send. You can do some EQing with the reflections and all of that, depending on the reverb that you're using. See, I do have a battery, but it'd be dumb to not use it on the fridge. Yeah, makes sense. No problem. You can obviously, depending on your EQ, you can obviously do some EQing within the reverb itself, but you just don't have quite as much fine control over it. So, because generally in the lower mid section is kind of where all of the instruments kind of bunch up and fight each other, this is an area that I usually like to clean up quite a bit. So you have your lower mids here. It depends on the song. It kind of shifts because, of course, songs have different timbres and different keys and whatever. So it kind of shifts. But generally between, like, I would say the 300 and 700 hertz range, you tend to have, like, all of the instruments kind of having their, like, lower frequencies fight with each other and clash with each other, and it just creates a mess. So it usually helps to kind of start EQing that area out a little bit, so to kind of reduce some of the fighting. And one of the things I do in EQing and basically everything is some sort of degree of control over that area. Unless the instrument is specifically meant to live within that area, then obviously I wouldn't EQ that down. But anyways, so of course I've done that here with the reverb as well. I've EQ'd the reverb send in order to kind of accentuate the things that I want to feel spacious, which is of course going to be your trebles. So you can see here with band number 4 that we're getting a small little shelf here. I'm mostly working subtractively is the way that I usually work with EQs. With some exceptions, I rarely work additively with EQs. Usually if I work additively EQ, it's within the like synth or instrument that I'm working in. There are, like I said, there are some exceptions where I'll work additively, but in general, working subtractively with EQs is better. You want to be removing instead of adding. So you can see here there is a slight bump to the trebles to go ahead and kind of add some more space to the brighter things in the mix, while reducing kind of the bassier things. So that's how I've set up my sends, and this is pretty typical of my sends, is having the reverb and then an EQ there as well. Like I did mention, this song is kind of a little bit of an exception with some additional bonuses here, like the compressor beforehand. This is quite an aggressive compressor, but it's mostly just to deal with some spurious peaks with a very, very soft knee, so hopefully it's not compressing it too hard. But if it does have some wild spurious peak, it gets slammed into a brick wall eventually, so it won't get out of hand. Then of course I have nothing on this, surprisingly. I kind of thought maybe I'd use this to kind of widen the stereo field, but I'm going to be honest, that would be kind of surprising to me anyways. Stereo width is not something I generally play around with a lot, because if you just shift things around with pan and EQ things right, stereo width doesn't make a lot of sense. That's not to say I never use it, but it's something I definitely rarely touch. So, anyways. What was one of the other things I wanted to talk about? Where's my thing? Ghosting. Okay, so, now surprisingly, I don't use a lot of sidechaining in this song. I do use some, so it's more than none. If we go to my sub bass, here it is. It's muted for some reason. Why is that? Oh. There we go, because it's not routed. I did not route the sub bass to the reverb, because you really don't want reverby bass, because it's going to make a mess out of your lower frequencies quite a bit. So this is my sub bass, and if we check here, this one I do believe, it will notice that we have this lower shelf, this low shelf that is pumping, and that's to knock the sub bass frequencies out of the range of the kick. This just kind of allows for more headroom, because the way that frequencies work is additively. So if you have, basically, let's say you have a 50 hertz frequency that's playing with your kick, and you have a 50 hertz frequency playing with your sub bass, those two frequencies get added together, right? So to not make a mess out of the bass range, and to also allow for more headroom, because bass adds up rather quickly, which is why you only have like two instruments that live in the bass frequencies, and that's basically your kick and your bass guitar. Because bass adds up really quickly. So having a sidechain like this, just knocking the sub basses out of the way for the kick, just kind of helps keep things clean. Now the thing is that if we go down to my drums are some wacky ass fucking drums. Let's go. Where do we want to start? How about right here? Okay, so this is something I definitely do in my EDM, any of my electronic music, and this is what gets the big sound in electronic music, is layering. Layering after layering after layering. And basically, we have three different drum kits that are going on here. So first, we have a standard kind of 909 kick, or kit, sorry. I really love 808s and 909s. Just complete side note. 808, 909, the most fucking overused sound in the world. They are more overused than the RPG Maker RTP. And yet you never hear anyone complain about it except for, you know, there's a few pretentious musicians out there who complain about 808s and 909s. Just the best synth drum sounds that have ever been made. I could go on a whole rant about other like drum sounds, like you have the Vengeance kit and the Field Mob snare. God, I hate the Field Mob snare. All these drum sounds, they have a particular sound profile to them that make them very obvious in every mix. And because they're so obvious, you can't ignore it once you notice it. But with the 808s and 909s, they have a distinct profile, but at the same time, it's not so distinct that it's like immediately obvious. Ah, that's an 808, or that's a 909. Especially once you start layering it in there, you get kind of the chunky 909 in the snare and kick, but you can layer that with other kick sounds, so you get the nice meaty bassy, but you can also get a nice impactful like standard like real acoustic drum kit, right? So when you combine those, you get a really nice fat kick drum. Which is why I do a lot of layering here. So we have the 808, I'm sorry, it's a 909 kit right here. But I also have a acoustic kick right here as well. It seems like it's been smashed to hell, if I recall correctly. Yes, I do think so. Could be smashed more, but surprisingly not. Might be on the individual. I think it's on the individual snare and kick. Oh yeah, we got some OTT going on. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so anyways, so we have the acoustic kit there. It's mostly just to add some texture to it. Yeah, they have that boom, but still a lot of snap that you can pick out of a large lineup of instruments. Yeah. I do think most musicians will quickly become familiar with the 808 and 909, but I feel like your general listeners probably have no idea what an 808 or 909 sounds like. It does have quite a legacy. When they hear 808 or 909, they might be like, oh yeah, that's like an EDM thing, right? They might know that much, but they probably wouldn't be able to know what an 808 or 909 is. Anyways, so yeah, so we have the acoustic kit there, and then to add some more meat and chunk to the drums, we have a damage kit down here. It's just kick and snare. It's a little bit wacky right here. Let's listen to that. Okay, so this is all just to talk about layering with drums. Yeah, I'm usually very much on the side of very acoustic types of music, but I still know what an 808 and 909 is. Yeah. So anyways, so this was all to talk about layering, but actually more importantly is talking about side chaining. I was going to get into that eventually. So here's the thing. Actually, in recent years, I have stopped separating out my drum kit into individual instruments. You can see I did it with this song here. I'm sure there is a reason why. I bet it has to do with the snare and the kick, probably, because both of these have some OTT. This one has the Camel Crusher, which is a distortion unit on it. It's mixed, mostly dry. So I'm guessing I separated out the kick. Sorry, I keep saying kick. I don't know why. I separated out the kit into the separate instruments because I specifically wanted to apply OTT and distortion to the snare and kick. I'm assuming that's why I did it. But normally, if I don't want to specifically, process an instrument, one of the drums a specific way, then I don't do it like this. I don't separate it out. I used to do that. In fact, if you all of the entire album of Believe was done this way, because for the longest time I did it this way. Is I would separate out my kit like this and put it into a folder, and then process the folder as one, as the kit, and then process the individual instruments. It's a little bit overkill. I think that's what this is here. This muted track right here is the whole kit combined, because I believe, if I recall correctly when I was working on this, it started out as everything combined, but then I wanted to kind of make some finer tuning on the snare and kit and decided to kind of separate them out into the individual tracks like this. So anyways, point is that if you are like me now in my modern day, where I don't separate the kit out into individual tracks, the problem is that if you want to sidechain something specifically to the kick drum, well, that's a little bit difficult because your kick drum is now embedded with also your snare and your hi-hat as well, and whatever else is going on with your percussion. So that's where ghosting comes in. Ghosting is also better than not just for separating out the kick from everything else, but also if you want to make finer tuned adjustments to the response curve of your sidechaining. So down here I have this purple track, which is a ghost track. Let's give it a listen. It's nothing. Yeah, it's a ghost track. That's the point. So basically, the way that this works is that there is a kit playing, but the way that it has been routed to the sidechain is that it will pass it before the fader. That is one of the options here. All right, pre-fader, post effects. So before I turn the volume down, it's passing the audio to the sidechain. To the routed, sidechain instrument. But the actual playback of the instrument is silent. So we're not adding extra kicks into the actual listening part of the music. It's just a ghosted kick that will never be heard. However, it will be felt by sidechaining different instruments. So I use ghosting quite a lot in my music. The other reason is because it doesn't have to be a kick drum necessarily. I have used a kick drum here, but in the past, I have used white noise, and if you use a synthesizer, then it's just about how much sound is going into the sidechained element, and therefore it doesn't have to be any specific good sound. It can be anything that is producing a sound profile. So here, I am using a kick drum as the sidechaining element, but if you look over here at this panel, I've tuned the decay of it just a little bit to get a more accurate profile for what I want for the sidechaining effect. Probably in this song, I didn't do it as much as I do in others because the sidechaining effect is very limited in its use. You have the low shelf pumping with the kick drum, but honestly, that's very, very transparent in the mix, so it doesn't need to be tuned perfectly because it's very difficult to hear that. Maybe here I also sidechained this noise because, I mean, of course, it's EDM. You have to have like some sort of noise like buildup. Right, so there you can really hear the pumping with the kick. So maybe some of the tuning was done for this. I am guessing it's this one. Yeah, we can see it pumping right there. So, but in this song specifically, I didn't use like heavy use of sidechaining. It's just this one and the sub bass. That's it. If there was a very EDM song with lots of like sidechain pumping, that is an appropriate time to use the ghosting and kind of use the sonic profile of it, the dynamics of the sound, to have better, finer control over how the pumping actuates. So, yeah, there we go. We talked about layering drums. Here's the other thing though about layering is layering doesn't just stop at drums. When you want to get a really big like sound, layering in other instruments is pretty important as well. Like for example, here in this piano mix, I've layered 2 pianos together, which is admittedly kind of abstract. I don't do this often. You can see I take advantage of having 2 pianos though. So I have a more acoustic grand piano. This is a Contact Library. This is Noir. I love Noir. I love the tone. It's a Yamaha Grand modified with felt hammers, I believe. And it's just, it's such a beautiful sound. So I use Noir a lot. And here, it's just Noir. However, later on, I want to get this nice big piano sound that like kind of cuts through the mix. And so it's not just Noir. It's actually, the cheap like workstation keyboard pianos, I hate them by themselves most of the time. But one thing they do really well is be very bright. And layering that brightness in addition with an acoustic piano really helps make the piano just like slice through the mix. Right. Actually, that was the next thing I was going to talk about. So we just heard the piano being layered there. If we go to my string section, so we have a pretty nutso string section here. If we listen to, I do believe it is this portion of the song. I only do it this once in the song, but here, let's solo the strings. Nice to have you here, Mr. Orc. So here, we're mostly using my Contact Library, which is Berlin first chairs, because it is slightly more affordable than their mainstream section. I also kind of like the more solo kind of vibe of the first chairs. They're big, super expensive, like Berlin orchestra set, which first of all costs way too much, but also you don't really get that kind of closeness feel. So the first chair is really nice. Yeah. If we go here, there's a string layer. Doing well, Mr. Orc. We're talking to Meg. Meg is Miss Little Fish on the RPG Maker forums, one of the mods, and also a great music composer. She wanted to learn some production techniques, and I'm helping her out with that. Although honestly, I don't know if I'm talking stuff that she already knows or not. You gotta ask me the questions. Come on, Meg. Ask me the questions so I can teach you. It's my job. I'm a teacher by day. I'm not a game maker. Anyways, if we go, if we mute this, we can hear all of these. This is all Berlin strings. So that sounds pleasant. OTT is a little bit overdriven on this, but I guess the song is pretty bright. By themselves, these strings I would say are too bright, and that's mostly thanks to OTT. We'll get to OTT soon. But overall, it sounds fine, but it's not quite big enough. So again, with layering, let's turn this back on, and we can kind of hear what this all sounds like with this layer back in here, and hear how it makes everything so much bigger. Don't time out my chatter, Mr. Orc. Don't do it. This stream is for Meg. I haven't really done a lot of sidechaining, so that is something I need to do on my drums. My bass drum aren't boomy enough in my orchestral stuff. I'm not sure if I understand completely if you're... I'm not sure if you're saying that like your bass, like if you're having a problem with your bass drums not being boomy enough, or if you just aren't making them boomy enough. If it's the latter case, then basically that kind of comes down to, there could be phase canceling. I mean, there could be a number of different problems. Phase canceling is where you have, like, if you think of a sine wave and a sine wave, especially when it comes to like low stuff. I mean, it's how our noise canceling headphones work, right? It's basically they just mimic the waves that are coming at them, and if it's just the opposite of the wave, like we have a wave here and a wave here, when they touch each other, remember, frequencies add up. They add. So if you have a negative value that's the same as the positive value, and you add them together, you get 0. And that's what phase canceling is. So if you're talking about your bass drum not being boomy enough, there is the possibility of phase cancellation. I will be honest here, I don't hear that happen very often, unless you're dealing with either very similar sounding basses. I can say how to deal with this is, if you are layering lots of different kick drums together, you should really have different kick drums fulfill different parts of the mix. Like, for example, this kick drum is really best for its like sub bass boom. So I'm going to EQ it just for that, and that means all the other kick drums that you layer on top of each other should not touch that area. Excuse me. So you should have one dedicated bass drum boom, and then maybe you have like a kind of a mid-range kick drum boom, and then maybe you have kind of top end kind of with your kick drum, and then you can kind of layer those together, and you have dedicated kick drums for like each different parts of the frequency spectrum. Let's see, what did you say, Mr. Orc? I had a person on Fiverr place an order for some map without contacting me first on Fiverr. The guy thought he would just get a custom tile set along with the map for a couple of bucks. See, honestly, probably both, lol. I will very much hear them come in, but not feel them, if that makes sense. Yeah. When it comes to feeling, it's kind of funny, because part of that is going to have to do with dynamics, but this gets complicated, right? Part of it has to do with dynamics, but it kind of has to do with dynamics across the whole frequency range. What really happens, and if we're talking like an orchestral bass drum, I'm gonna be honest, I don't like orchestral bass drums because they tend to have quite a long tail, and they kind of trail off quite linearly, which doesn't really give you that nice dynamic, like kind of what's the fucking word? Exponential curve to it. You don't get that exponential curve. You get kind of like a linear curve, more or less. And so you don't really get the... You want to feel that spike. And bass drums are not good at that. You get a boom, right? What I can tell you... Remember, I was talking about 909s and 808s. I do this a lot with my own sound effects when I'm making sound effects with my for my game. If I want a sound effect to be a little bit more punchy, I layer in a 909 kick. And I may tuned the 909 kick down a lot, and I cut off all the high frequencies. I just keep the low frequencies. And because it has a nice to it. See, I layered one that had a lot more of that bottom end that goes out into the crowd and EQ'd out the top. Yeah. There you go. Just like that. Like if we take a look here at this kick. So this is my acoustic kit right here. And we look at the equalizer. It's a bad example. I don't always follow my rules. Maybe if we go to the here. Okay, it's not a lot. This is not a good example. But you can see I've shelved off quite a bit of the bass. See, then used one that has a bit more of the snappy sound that goes upwards. Okay, so I don't know. I'm not gonna say I don't really use orchestral bass drums that much, so I don't know if I wouldn't go. Don't say that. Probably not as well as I could do. No. You could probably do it just fine as well. I probably get the same result. Here's one thing that I will do. Here's a cheat sheet. Okay, get M equalizer. It's part of the Melda EQ's or Melda's free plugin package. In MEQ, you can go to areas and go to drums, and you can see it labels these different sections of the frequency spectrum of where different parts of the drum sounds are. I use this cheat sheet quite a lot, especially when it comes to bass. You get the bass boom down here, bass body, bass kick, and the plastics. So the plastics is going to be the really kind of basically, hitting the plastic. It's the, that part of the bass kick. And then the bass kick itself is going to be a little bit more slappy to it. And then bass body is going to be kind of the oomph, but not quite the oomph, if that makes sense. And then bass boom is obviously the sub bass part of it, the part that you feel. One of the other things that you can do is make sure that you're EQing things. This is the thing where it also gets kind of crazy, where I would really advise making sure that you do plenty of listening. And that is to EQ the bass. And this is maybe one of the areas where you want to work additively with your EQ, is to kind of bump the bass up a little bit with your EQ. I don't know if I did that in this song. Again, probably not. When it comes to my more jazzy stuff, it is something that I tend to do, because the jazzy kind of kick drum tends to not have a lot of bass in it. And obviously, coming from more of an EDM background, I tend to prefer a little bit more bass in my music. So I do prefer to crank up the jazzy kick drums bass a little bit. But here, actually, it's the opposite. I'm tuning it down, and that's because I'm working with a lot of kick drums and a lot of bass. So obviously, I don't want to overwhelm listeners with bass and make a muddy mess out of the song. But basically, just use your EQ to kind of boost the bass. But like I said, you have to be careful with this. It's very easy for your ears to kind of get used to that bass, and it might sound really good in your headphones, especially if you're using like MX50s or 70s, I think you said you're using. It's very easy for it to feel like, oh, that sounds really good. And then you go take it on a walk with like your little earbuds or whatever, where these are not meant for reference, so they tend to have what's called the V curve, where you kind of boost the bass and boost the highs, and all of a sudden you kind of realize, holy shit, that's a lot of bass. Yeah, I would recommend, if you start adding bass, definitely make sure that you are checking your mix across multiple devices. One thing that I like to do is, obviously I know my little what are these? I forgot what these are called. Galaxy Buds, Galaxy Bud Pro 2. I don't know. They came with my fancy, folding phone, whatever. So anyways, normally what I like to do is, when I get a mix to a happy place, a place that I'm comfortable with, here on my MX50s, then I will just go for a walk. And I will go for a walk and listen to my song on my earbuds. Now, I don't consider these the end-all be-all. However, when it does come to bass, I do kind of consider them as a good reference for bass. Not anything else. So I kind of give it a listen, and if I notice anything remarkable, then I'll adjust it. Because one of the things is that when you're listening to it, you're constantly focusing on mixing on your sorry, I should use that camera. You're constantly focusing on the mix that you're working on, that sometimes you kind of become ear blind to, you become deaf to different parts of the mix. And so you kind of need a break, and a good way to give yourself a palate cleanser is to listen to it on a different set of monitors. So like, even though these are not final, it may still point out some things that you might have just gone deaf to. And before considering that, like, oh yeah, that's definitely something I need to change, I'll be like, oh yeah, I hear that sounds wrong. I should double check at home to see if it sounds that way too. And then I'll double check at home, and it's like, oh yeah, that's definitely, we need to make an adjustment to that. So I also have my really old 280 Pros. I don't often use these anymore. But I will occasionally reference on my HD 280 Pros if I'm having a particular tough time with a mix. It's just, once again, another source to sanity check myself with the mix. So, yeah. When it comes to bass, there's another thing that we should talk about with bass. So here's the thing with bass. I see this problem a lot with modern mixes. Also, nothing wrong with waiting a day. Sometimes I get so sick of listening to something I feel all sorts of ways and just need to do something else. Yeah. I'm kind of an impatient person. I'm always excited about having new music, especially when it's my music. I'm always excited to listen to my music. So I generally don't want to wait a day. So that's why once I get to a happy point in my mix, I will mix it down, plop it on my phone, go for a walk, and listen to the song a few times. Come back home and make the adjustments that I think are necessary. But that's because, again, I'm a little bit impatient. Anyways, I didn't finish talking about the strings, but to wrap that up, it's basically the strings. I've layered in a string machine, I guess you could say, a string synthesizer. I have a sound font here, just to kind of give some more breath to the string mix. Right. Oh, and there we go. Sorry, I didn't show you. There we go. Here's my Roland Xenology. I use Xenology quite a lot. A lot. I would recommend Xenology, other than their horrible fucking pricing practices, which sucks because it's a really good synthesizer. It's just a really good workhorse of a plugin, but pricing. I'm going to take a short break. I really need to pee, like really bad. I've been drinking tea like all day. And in addition to that, I just drank a lot of sake and drinking a beer now. So you'll have to excuse me. Let's listen to another one of these songs. How about this one? I'm back. All right, so since bass is one of the things, bass definitely is one of the more difficult things to tame. If you go looking, you'll find like 100 different plugins that are all about taming the bass, and it's funny because if you go back 50 years, people were mostly using compressors and EQs, not a lot of fancy different effects, and yet we're able to rein in the bass. So it's funny that all these people are producing plugins about controlling the bass when all you need is basically an EQ, a compressor, and actually one other slightly more modern tool is actually it's not even that modern. It's just a stereo controller. Here's the thing: there are some long lost arts when it comes to mixing that I see a lot of like modern releases pay no attention to. We're talking our big major label releases, Taylor Swift, I don't even know, Doja Cat. A lot of the like modern huge superstar pop artists, they all have like stupid names and I can't ever remember any of them. Like Doja Cat, like what the fuck is that name? Anyways, like these kind of big releases, you'll even see them ignore kind of a lost art when it comes to mixing, and that's mixing for vinyl. I know that sounds crazy. Like, obviously, they're not going to mix for vinyl because no one fucking listens to vinyl except for weird hipsters. But no, seriously, there not only was mixing for vinyl necessary because the music exists in a physical groove, and therefore you need to make some very specific adjustments to how the music is mixed in order for it to produce sound. But it just had some more sane control over I do single anyways, it had more control over the frequencies and the loudness of the music. Now, I'm not here to argue about the loudness war. I partake in quite a lot of compression. We still haven't gotten around to OTT yet, which is just the secret ingredient to making anything sound bright and loud. But anyways, I am no stranger to loudness. However, there are still aspects of vinyl mixing that I think should be heeded, and I think people should continue to use those aspects of vinyl mixing. One of the very important ones is bass. The thing is about bass is that it doesn't need to have a stereo space to it. Bass is considered an omnidirectional sound. It is such a low frequency that, especially for our ears, we feel it more than we hear it. And as a result of feeling it, we're not using our ears, right? And our ears is what tells us direction of sounds. And so there's no reason, if we can't, like, if we're more feeling it than hearing it, then there's no reason to really necessarily have bass occupy a stereo space. Therefore, one of the things that was actually necessary for vinyl, but is still kind of important for headroom and making bass more clear and kind of cut through the mix, is making the bass mono. So on all of my mixes, I will put on this multi-band stereo width plugin. This is G Stereo. It's a free plugin, part of the G Suite, not the Google Suite, but GVST Suite. I think the whole GVST Suite is free. It's actually quite old, so I don't even know if it's around anymore, but I've used GVSTs for basically as long as I've been doing music. Anyways, the nice handy tool here is the multi-band stereo tool. So basically, I just set the low frequency. This is where the bass starts. I set it, this is actually a little bit higher than normal. I'd probably set it around like 130, 120 or something like that. and then set the bass to mono. Believe it or not, there is like a $200 plugin that does that. I hate the fucking plugin industry for music. That is absurd. Like, people complain about Visual Stella being expensive. Can you imagine spending like $200 for a plugin that just mono pans your bass? It is absurd. Anyways, mono panning your bass, it basically just makes it equal. Technically, you know, you can think of stereo space as being a center and left and right, but that's not really how headphones work. So it might be, so we can say, if that's how you think of it, then it is center channel. More accurately is it's equal volume in your left and right headphone. Yeah, some of the plugins are ridiculous. Absolutely. I hate the music plugin industry. It is. I have a vendetta against it. So anyways, GVST free. Just get, and it doesn't even have to be GVST. It's just the only one that I know of that does multi-band stereo width, but I'm sure it's not the only one that does it. So just pan your bass center, and that's going to help it cut through. Now this was important in vinyl because of the bass frequencies being so big that it could cause distortion in the needle when reading them, especially if it's left and right. So by center panning it, it would help reduce some of the distortion that could be caused by having, well, big bass wobbles. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like, you have your fab filter stuff. How much does that cost? Let's look that up. Fab filter. I type the fab. That's gonna come up with something else. The fab filter. Like the Pro Q. How much is this shit? It's crazy. 30-day trial. Wow. I also hate this. So many of the plugins do this. There's not just like a price that is obvious. God, I hate the plugin industry. Okay, that's the total bundle. I was about to say, holy shit, if that's the price of an EQ. Here we go. Pro Q, 169 euros. So, I don't know, that's roughly like, what is that, like $180? Jesus Christ. I hate this fucking industry. Anyways, yeah. Anyways, so basically, you really don't see a lot of songs that are like produced by major labels now center panning their bass. I don't know why. It doesn't really add much. I will admit that there is a degree of extra width that does come with having a stereo left and right bass, but it just doesn't add that much to me. And you get so much more. You get so much extra headroom. The bass comes through so much more clearer when you just center pan it. So, I don't know. I would say to me, it's a worthwhile trade of making your bass mono. That's up to you. I definitely think it's something that you should do, however. So, one of the other things that you definitely don't see because of the loudness war is a -1 dB ceiling. Why is it -1 dB? There's a good reason for that. First of all, when it comes to dithering works much better when you apply a -1 dB ceiling, because the way that dithering works is that it is mixing very gentle noise into your mix. Can we get a visualization of dithering? I do -1. Very good. It is also another practice when it comes to like vinyl mastering is applying a minus 1 dB limit or minus 1 dB ceiling. But anyways, let's look at dithering. We're gonna look at visual photo dithering because it's effectively the same thing. Image dithering. It works the same way. So, can we get a good example? Okay, this is a pretty good example. So, sound dithering works effectively the same way. So, in image dithering, you have your base image, and you're applying some noise to the image to get a sharper image in the end. So, although this has more detail, this image looks much sharper based on the dithering. This is actually not the best example. I kind of wish we had like some DOS, because this was used a lot in like early DOS games. But anyways, the point is that you apply some random noise to the image to make it look sharper than it really is and have more detail than it really does. And effectively, this is the same thing as this is the same idea in music. You are applying random noise very gently on top of the music to help kind of bring out some finer details, make it seem like it has more details than it really does. However, you are adding sound on top of sound. Again, remember, frequencies are additive. Even if it's very subtle, we're talking like 0.1 decibels of sound being added on top of your music. If your music is already slammed up to the ceiling at 0 decibels, when you add in that noise to add dithering, well, you're not really dithering it. You are now clipping the audio because you've added in 0.1 over 0 decibels, which is what happens when you clip. So technically, do you need to do -1? No. I've seen some major labels at least apply a minus 0.1 ceiling to their music, which is fine. There's the loudness war, so I suppose that's why they want to preserve the other, 9 decibel that they get out of it. But using -1 decibels just gives more wiggle room. It reduces the chance of distortion quite clearly. To me, it just sounds more pleasant having a -1 decibel ceiling. So all of my music has a -1. Yeah, I like my ears. Yeah. Yeah, so all of my music has a -1 decibel ceiling on it. And I've done that for a long time. So there we go. There is there's the two analog, that's the word. There's the two analog style mixing techniques that I use quite regularly that I think should continue to persist into the modern era. So I don't know if you had done making your bass mono. Give it a try. See if that helps make things more clear. Yeah. And then if you're already doing the -1, then nothing else to do there. In Reaper, you don't actually need the... I use Ozone's dither because I might as well. It's here. Dithering is dithering. It doesn't really matter. If I'm being honest, I don't really understand much about the magic of dithering. And also, if I'm being honest, I kind of don't hear much of a difference between an undithered song and a song that has been dithered. However... I do know that you should dither your music, so I do it anyways. Reaper does have dithering built in. If you go to render, you have dither master right there, and noise shaping is using the noise. It's part of dithering, so you can just check those two, and that would apply the same thing as Ozone. But I use Ozone's dithering because, like I said, I might as well. It's just right here. So there is one catch with the Ozone thing. This probably doesn't affect you too much. But if you use any sort of master limiter like Ozone here, if you use anything like that, it has to be the last thing in your Master Effects plugin because it's applying. Because if you apply any sort of effect after the dithering, it's going to mess up how the dithering works. So it absolutely has to be last in the chain. If you are not applying dithering through an effect, and instead using the renderer, obviously the renderer is going to be the last thing at the end. So obviously you wouldn't need to worry about where it's placed in the effects chain. I don't know why you'd want to place any sort of effects after your limiter. But, you know, who am I to judge? I think in the past I have used a clipper at the end here just to... I don't know. I have no idea why, honestly, because this is basically a brick wall, so... I don't know. Anyways, yeah. You have dithering built into Reaper, or you can just use Ozone's built-in dithering. What else was there that I want to talk about? We talked about ghosting, layering, EQ... Oh, OTT. We should talk about OTT. This is very short. OTT is an effect. It's a free effect, too. OTT is what's called an upward-downwards compressor. And that does exactly what it sounds like. Your regular compressor is a downwards compressor. When a sound is too loud, it smashes that sound down, right? Well, when a sound is too quiet, OTT will lift that sound up. So if you want to hear every goddamn lip smack that a singer has, OTT is great for that. But seriously, because it can lift even the quietest things up into very audible sounds, OTT is absolutely great on brightening things up. I would not do it on a lot of recordings, or if you do it in a recording, use it very gently. However, when it comes to synthesizers, oh man, synthesizers eat this stuff up. Like if we go to, I bet my gen lead here has OTT on it. Let's check. I am correct. Let's listen to my gen lead here. Okay, so we get an idea of that. So let's turn OTT off. Boo. Aw, yeah. So we can see how that really lifts the top end quite a lot. Basically what OTT is, this is a free plugin, believe it or not. Less sparkle, yeah. So this is a free plugin. This is also using an old version. So the new version actually is, believe it or not, actually OTT is a pretty old plugin. It used to be, I think the story is, it used to be a paid-for plugin, but then it became legacy, and Xfer just decided to release it for free. People like Skrillex and all the dubstep artists got a hold of OTT, and people suddenly fell in love with OTT. And it basically stayed as legacy software for forever. But I think it was sometime in like 2020, 2021 or something like that. Because OTT had such a huge following behind it. There is like, it surprises me that there's no like workhorse upwards downwards compressor like OTT since OTT's release. OTT continues to be a huge favorite among EDM producers. They started supporting OTT again, but it's still free. And so actually, like I said, this is the old version. The newly updated version, after like a decade of no development on it, they now allow you to resize the UI so it's not so tiny. And it just has a cleaner interface. It didn't make any major changes to it, but still a nicer looking interface and a resizable interface. Good stuff. So basically, I use OTT on nearly every track. When it comes to synthesizers, I have the depth, which is your wet dry knob, cranked up nearly to the top. Usually not 100% because, again, you are lifting the quiet parts up, which makes, it makes everything sound like it is just screaming at you in your face. So, obviously I don't keep it at 100% most of the time. Synthesizers tend to eat this stuff up, so I keep the depth cranked up pretty high. But when it comes to stuff like strings or pianos, I sometimes do apply it to like strings and pianos and stuff. And just putting it at like 20%, maybe 30%, you get some of the brightness of everything being lifted up, but you're not getting the screaming effect. Goddamn. I even turned down the mix just so so I didn't blow your ears out. Anyways, so like strings and piano stuff, it's still nice to use on strings and pianos to just kind of add a little brightness to it, just a subtle brightness to everything, but just put the depth at like 20 or 30%. And that way, yeah, you get the brightness, but you don't get the screaming effect. For an example of screaming, how about this? I think it'll be fun to throw it on guitars. Let's throw this on guitars real fast. So here we have this fun little section. And let's just hear what happens to get that screaming effect. We're getting there. Let's just layer another one on top. How about another one? The bass is... How about another one? Yeah. Oh, and here you can see it's using the... Holy shit. You can see it's using the latest updated version of OTT. Anyways, you get the idea. It can really create this very, very bright, very choked effect. Because as the name implies, OTT, meaning over the top, it will just go completely nuclear on the downwards compression and obviously go completely nuclear on the upwards compression as well. Mr. Orc, I had actually, when I had mixed your vocals for you, I showed you like an example of how I think the vocals should sound in your game. I know you prefer them dry, but I gave you some examples. One of the things I definitely did to them was I had applied a little bit of OTT to them to kind of really brighten up the voice. It really kind of helps cut through mixes quite a lot. So anyways, yeah, consider OTT. Just like search OTT plugin. It's by Xfer, so maybe you can search Xfer OTT or something like that. It is free, like I said, and it is something that gets used regularly on every single one of my projects. Yeah. Another one that I should mention as well, really more of a synthesizer thing, just kind of like OTT tends to eat up, or synthesizers tend to eat up OTT. There's also something like distortion, downsample, and bit crushing. You can find pretty general basic bit crushing and downsample plugins. However, I really like Crush because you can do a mix of wet and dry. So I can apply the bit crushing and downsampling to the audio, but it doesn't get that bit crush downsampled sound, which would be like this. It's really harsh. It's really, really harsh. So you can kind of you can do a wet dry mix here. And you get to preserve some of the natural, less harsh tones while mixing in some of the harshness as well. And again, when it comes to lead synthesizers, this kind of stuff is really good. So, and Crush is also another free plugin as well. So go ahead and download Crush. Yeah. What else is there? Let's take a look at the list here. Let's see, we talked about ghosting, layering. I guess we can talk about EQ, smoothing, OTT, multi-stage compression. Maybe can talk about that. Actually, I think multi-stage compression is probably more useful. This is a rare effect. It's not something I use that often, but I do use it often enough that I feel like it's probably a tool that you should know about. So obviously the thing is with compression is that it's going to knock the loudest part down, and depending on how much compression you apply is how how much quieter that loud part's going to be. The problem with applying too much compression is that you lose the dynamic range. You tend to get a very flat kind of wave, and it kind of loses some of the punch in it. Now, you do have compression, I think they call it New York style compression or something like that, where basically you do a wet-dry mix of compression. I do that on my jazz music. I doubt it's going to be here in this song. Yeah, it's not here in this song. But basically, you can do wet dry. So wet dry would preserve some of the peaks because you'll have a little bit of the dry in there. So you'll have the uncompressed sound mixed in with the compressed sound, and so you'll get some of the peaks in there, but you won't get the full thing. So it won't be clipping your audio or causing problems there, while also, getting the kind of compressed sound as well. Problem is that sometimes you really want to preserve the sound profile while still kind of getting some headroom out of it. So multi-stage compression is exactly as it sounds. It's just using multiple compressors in the same effects chain. So let's take some drums, for example. I actually probably wouldn't do this on drums because I tend to put them into multiple mixes already. So they kind of... Oh, look, I've done it here. Okay. So basically multi-stage compression. So we have one compressor here which has a very light ratio, just a 2-to-1 ratio. And we can see so actually this is not reacting very much to this, and this is probably actually because of just an oversight on my end. It was probably supposed to react more, but I probably made some adjustments to the mixing of the drums that made the compression react less. But either way, you can see it reacts some. This is just to catch some of the peaks. So we're catching some of the peaks and knocking them down. And then, if we want to really, rein things in, then we apply another compressor, but this is a brick wall compressor, basically. We have it at 20-to-1, so basically anything that goes past the threshold is going to slam into that brick wall and be knocked down. Meanwhile, this one is only going to be gently pushed down. just a little bit, like that. So, yeah, so multi-stage compressor. You really see multi-stage compression. It's more useful for vocals. When it comes to vocals, you probably want to... Sheesh! Anyways, welcome, Nerd Mansion. With multi-stage compression, when it comes to vocals, like, you probably want to pull down some of the, like, the harsher tones of, you know, certain syllables and stuff like that, like your puss and bus and tuss, stuff like that. So you have your first stage of compression that is gently pulling those down. Sorry, that's actually backwards. Oh gosh, I can't quite recall. Let's stop the drums. Can I recall how this works? You have the first stage of compression meant to kind of get the overall profile, the kind of bringing the voice forward. So it's gentle compression just meant to help bring the singer's voice forward in the mix by making it a little bit more present, a little bit louder. While the second stage of compression is meant to rein in and control some of the harsher syllables in the singer's voice. So multi-stage compression is more used in singing. However, anything that you may have those kind of anytime you have something like that where you have compression, or you have an instrument that you want to bring forward in the mix, but also you want to reduce the really harsh parts, then you'd use multi-stage compression, where you have a little bit of compression to bring it forward, and then a really heavy-handed compression to kind of cut off spurious peaks. And now I'm a little bit crazy. Of course, there's the loudness wars and stuff like that. And usually I slam a clipper in at the end. Again, GVST. We can see once again I'm using that here at the end to kind of control even the most spurious of peaks that make it past my compressor. Okay. Kind of have the hiccups. Yep, there it is again. Excuse me. Let's see. So what's left? We've done ghosting, layering, I haven't done EQ smoothing, OTT, multi-stage compression, monopan bass, and -1 dB limiting. So about EQ smoothing, so I kind of talked a little bit about EQing in general, which is when it comes to like this range here, somewhere between like 300 and 700 hertz, you tend to have a lot of the band. So the way you can think of it is if we have our frequency range here, let's look at one that has a wider spectrum. There we go. It's smaller window, but a wider range. So we can kind of think of most instruments, like the part that really carries like the melody and the notes is generally kind of here in this range. Every instrument generally tends to be in this 300 to like 5,000 hertz range. Generally you have like your glockenspiels up here, and then you have maybe guitars and stuff down here. But generally speaking, everything kind of lies in this range. The important part of the band lies in this range. Then you have your bass guitar and kick drum down here, and then you have like your airiness in the mix. Some, you know, you get some instrument sounds, like sounds of like air passing through a trumpet, or the bow brushing against the violin strings, or of course, more importantly, you have like your hi-hats and cymbals that occupy the space up here. So basically, every instrument exists pretty much within this range. And what happens is most instruments tend to exist in an even more narrow range. Let's say maybe between here and here. And so what happens is, even though the instrument occupies this whole space, you're really only hearing here to here in this range. And so you get some extra noise from every instrument that tends to occupy this area right here, the low mids. And what happens is that because every single instrument in the band is now occupying the space, and again, frequencies add up, everything that exists in this space is adding and adding and adding and adding and adding, and you wind up just getting a whole bunch of mud in this mess. So you need to use an EQ to bring down this area. So I've kind of already talked about that a little bit kind of earlier in the stream. Something else that is a little bit more complex is EQ smoothing, which is, I have a special plugin to do this. That's going to be Soothe 2, which simplifies the process so much. But basically, you have some instruments that tend to have resonant frequencies. These are frequencies that are very harsh, that stick up. They have high resonance, and they can be very harsh on certain headphones, certain listening apparatuses, and it can hurt users' ears. Generally, you want a more smoother kind of graph. One of the things that we look for with our frequency spectrum is something that looks, I would say, on average, fairly smooth across the whole thing. So if we go to, let's unsolo this, and let's go to the MEQ. Let's actually just throw in a new one, actually, MEQ. Here. We're going to put it right there. And we're going to put it on averaging. We want to turn the averaging way up. Let's set it to like 3 seconds. So generally, we hope to see a fairly smooth graph across this. You can see in this song, I've kind of gotten a little bit aggressive with the mid-range here that I talked about. That's okay. To me, it still sounds fine, and on everywhere else that I've monitored it still sounds fine, despite there being a little bit of a scoop out of the frequencies here. It's okay. But generally speaking, we're trying to look for a fairly flat curve across this whole thing. So if we have like really harsh peaks that stick up really high, we want to deal with those. Generally speaking, you can do this by taking your time and using an EQ, and especially like something like a dynamic EQ. So a dynamic EQ is basically, it will lower the volume of it will lower the volume of a certain range of frequencies when it is triggered. When a certain frequency crosses that threshold, it'll work kind of like a compressor where it will knock that down. And you can do that with dynamic equalizers. Or I have Soothe, which makes this process so much simpler. And basically, it just analyzes the audio, looks for those spurious peaks in the frequencies, and knocks it down. So you can see it doing that here. Generally speaking, what we're seeing right now is not so much. So you have to keep in mind, so here's our graph. So we have the minus decibels here on the right side. So -3 is generally when most people start to detect a change in volume. So we can see that it's not even really reaching -3. So this is very transparent in what it's doing. However, there are times when this is actually being very effective. You tend to get some pretty harsh resonant frequencies from the very top end of violins, as well as, of course, I had mentioned earlier, like glockenspiels. Glockenspiels are worse. They tend to have some really, really painful, harsh frequencies. So something like this really helps take care of those kind of things. Of course, one of the downsides is that it does dramatically change the overall mix, because of course you're lowering volumes of the resonant frequencies, but sometimes those resonant frequencies also carry the most out of the melody or the music that's going on. So you may need to kind of either play around with the settings here to get something that sounds right, or have to go back into your mix and maybe compensate for how much it's reducing the volume. So there we go. EQ smoothing out the overall frequency profile of the song. And with that, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover in this song. Kind of taking a look at how this song has been constructed, sort of. We didn't really look at the individual instruments. I don't know if Meg is still here, either busy taking notes or busy moderating the forum, or maybe she lost power, like she said might happen. How long have I been streaming? 2 hours? I think 2 hours is pretty good. One thing I would maybe like to do real quick is kind of, we haven't looked at the individual parts of the song, because this stream isn't really about musical writing, so looking at the individual instrument parts is not really within the scope of this stream. Taking notes. Okay. Well, then, before I start looking at the individual parts of the song, why don't you go ahead and, if you have any questions, also yelling at someone who blocked in my driveway. I do not miss having a car. Anyways, why don't you go ahead and ask any questions that you might have while I take another toilet break. And then after that, if you don't have any questions, maybe I'll move on to just looking at the individual parts of the song and then maybe call that the end of the stream. Anyways, I don't know. Let's play a song while I go pee. Back. So, something I've heard a lot about is carving out EQ. A lot of what I read is usually pretty geared towards electronic, but I've been trying to learn more about how to use it in orchestral. Yeah. So, I think this is just good mixing technique in, just in general. When we're talking about, you know, recorded music or whatever you want to call this. carving out the EQ. I don't necessarily like phrasing it that way because it kind of sounds like you are doing harmful things to the music. But doing that to music, I think is actually very important, because you need to make sure that things sound nice to listen to. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the frequency spectrum. When we'll use this spectrum that's right here. I talked about how you generally have a lot of the instruments that kind of tend to lie within the 300 to 5,000 hertz range. And again, this all comes back to it is additive. Frequencies are additive. So if you wind up having a lot of instruments that occupy the same frequency space, is you start getting a lot of muddiness. You get a lot of clashing between the instruments. You get just some general ugliness that happens. So when it comes to EDM, electronic stuff, you get some people who get a little bit too overzealous with EQing. I think during some of my earlier days, I would generally get pretty overzealous with the EQing as well. However, I would say is when you pick your instruments, you should know where their major place lies within the frequency spectrum. And then you don't need to completely cut the frequencies out around that space, but maybe you should reduce the frequencies that are around it. Like this is where the main melody, the main part of the instrument lies here. So maybe I'm going to reduce some of the frequencies right here and right here. So that way it occupies this space, but it's occupying less of the other spaces around it. And that allows room for other instruments. One thing you can do, and I'm almost certain I didn't do it in this song. Can I think of a song where I did do it? I'd love to show this off proper. Did I do this in Dungeon Rummage's song? I might have done this because I remember I had a lot of trouble with the strings in Dungeon Rummage's song. It's new project tab. I just had it. Where is it? Spring Breeze, Dungeon Rummage Battle. So to explain what I'm looking for, is using side chaining again. If you have two instruments that tend to occupy the same space, if you were living in the old times, in the analog times, you just need to spend a long time monitoring, listening, playing with EQs, and adjusting gain until you get it just right, so that that way they sit together nicely. And props to you if you decide to go about it that way. I used to do things like that a long time ago, but it does take a long time to get it just right. And of course, if you don't have good monitoring equipment, it's difficult to do. So we can take a more heavy-handed approach thanks to living in a more modern era, where basically you can create a fake dynamic EQ where basically when one instrument is playing, you can use sidechaining to lower the gain of the less important instrument. Let's see if I did that. Let's see, I've routed the drums. All of these have been routed to the verb send, of course. Did I get any side chaining going, though? Verb send. Verb send. Verb send. Man, I swear I had... These strings in this song were like a huge pain in the ass, but I guess I just got it sorted and didn't actually have to resort to doing that. Yeah, I don't see it here. You can see I did use a ghost layer for the drums, however. Fun fact. Why did I use a ghost layer, though? What did I route that to? Bass. Okay, of course. I route it to the bass. That would make sense. So anyways, I can't think of a song where I actually use this technique, but I know I have used it. But basically, if you have... Did I do it in my most recent one? Those songs that I shared on my project's forum post. Probably cycle 2, cycle 3. Oh gosh. I think it was cycle 3. Anyways, yeah, so you'd use sidechaining. You'd link whatever you want to be your primary instrument, the one that's going to lead the sidechaining. Link that to the secondary instrument that it's fighting with, and then find that frequency that they're fighting with, and in the secondary instrument, put a band there and have the gain of the band tied to the, the first instrument's sidechain. It's if I hover over it, it says where it's linked to. Verb send, verb send, verb send. All of these are going to sends. Oh, it's receiving from the piano. What is it receiving from the piano? It's probably this, right? Yeah, it's this. Okay, I did it here. Cool. So we have this 8-bit kind of sound. Sorry, let's go back. So we have this like 8-bit square wave that is kind of playing the melody, but we also have the piano, which is also playing. It's not really playing the melody, but it tends to occupy the same frequencies. In this particular section, there's not really much of a problem, but I do remember that I think it was later on. Here, they are playing the same thing, and there's a lot of fighting between them. Was it here? Was it... Where was it? It's funny, I did this song not that long ago, and I can't even recall... I think it is here. Oh gosh, anyways, I can't recall, but you can kind of see an example of what's going on. So we had some frequencies that occupy the same space between the square wave kind of 8-bit sound and the piano. And so I used sidechaining here to create kind of a dynamic EQ to kind of push these frequencies out of the way of the piano, so that way there isn't so much fighting. This is kind of like more of an exceptional kind of thing. Like I said, back in the old days, you'd probably just spend a lot of time just playing with the EQ and playing with the gain until you get things to just sit right together. This is kind of a heavy-handed way of handling that. So it's also not something that I would say to do on every track. It's just like if you're sitting there listening and you're like, things get kind of muddy right here, then, try playing around with it to see if that kind of gives a little bit more breathing room to whatever instrument you want to take the lead. Yeah, like I said, this kind of goes back to what I was saying with, like, not forgetting mixing techniques of the past. The mixing for analog, I think we should continue to appreciate and use, but also at the same time, we should appreciate the technology that we have at our hands now. Different methods of mixing for different situations. So sometimes it's just maybe easier to play with EQs and gain until you get them to sit nicely with each other. Sometimes it's easier to just take the heavy-handed approach and just attach an EQ's gain to a sidechained output. So, anyways, but yeah, the point is, your original question was about carving out EQ, and that's basically about kind of understanding where instruments stand, like where their place is in the frequency spectrum. You can kind of consider when we were looking at the, let's just add an instance of MEQ. When we were looking at the different areas, here, that's a good one. We can apply these different areas to MEQ. I personally wouldn't use this one, but anyways, for what I'm talking about now, this works really well. You have these different areas, and you would basically want to have an instrument occupy this space, and ideally maybe only one instrument occupy those spaces. And that way, if only one instrument occupies that space, you're not getting a lot of fighting between the frequencies, because, you know, when you are only listening to like this portion of the low mids here, when you're only listening to that, a guitar is going to wind up sounding the same as a cello, you know. One has a different attack. Like, obviously, a cello has a softer attack compared to a guitar's strum, but the actual frequencies that occupy that space are relatively the same. So, by having, like, just a guitar and maybe a violin, you're not having anything that occupies these two spaces here, right? So they're not fighting with each other. You see what happens when you put them together is that they wind up combining, and in which case might actually, because of different harmonics in the instrument, will kind of have a harmonic that is very close to this one that kind of creates this ugly sound. It's kind of like when you create a dissonant chord when you mash two close notes together. Like I have a B flat and a B right here. Like if you were to smash those two together, it's not a very pretty sound. It's kind of the same thing. Is you might have some harmonics, different harmonics in the instrument that don't mesh very well with the other instrument that's occupying that space. And when those two harmonics are near each other, it sounds a little bit ugly. So that's the general idea of what you're kind of trying to listen for. It's a little bit different than, like, obviously when you're playing a B flat and a B next to each other, those are two very distinct sounds. And although they are close to each other, they are very distinct. And it's kind of what creates the ugliness. When it comes to harmonics like that in the frequencies, it's a little bit harder to hear it because it's not two distinct sounds. It's just very subtle frequencies that are kind of next to each other. So it's, on the one hand, it's not something I would worry about too much. It's where better monitoring equipment would help you kind of clean up that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I would still try to be mindful of it. Yeah. You know, create an M, sort of. I don't know what I'm doing. No, it's not an M. I guess that should be like a low shelf. High shelf. There we go. All right. It's M for Meg. Anyways. I don't know what that would sound like. That'd probably sound pretty heinous. Let's listen to our heinous EQ. Because that's on the master mix too. Oh gosh. Watch your ears. Volume warning. Oh, thankfully we have just tracks soloed. Still sounds atrocious. What does the whole thing sound like? Heinous. It's like a telephone, yeah. It's like a telephone underwater. Oh god, it's I didn't even notice this. It's like peaking really, really badly on OBS. So sorry about that. Anyways. Claps through. I cannot say I have. Claps are like the really resonant percussion, right? I think I know what you're talking about. I can imagine that could sound really painful through a telephone. Worst old music ever. Yeah. Yep, I think I know what you're talking about. I don't think I've ever heard it, but I can imagine that safely within my mind instead of having to damage my ear my hearing. See here on this song, we have the mono bass. You know what? Earlier I talked about having the New York style of compression. I'm pretty sure I did that here because when it comes to my jazzy stuff, I really don't like to overdo it on the compression. Oh shit. I say that. Hang on, let's rewind a little bit. Let's get some drums in there. Okay, they're not heavily compressed. Only getting -3 on a 2-to-1 ratio. But my big blue compressor, right? Yeah, my big blue compressor is turned down to 60%. So it's pretty dry before going into OTT. OTT is 35%, so it just kind of brings up some of that, again, what I was talking about earlier. Brings up some of the brightness in the drums, makes them a little bit more aggressive. We have a clip to handle any spurious peaks. OTT does some wild shit to the waveform of the music, so I usually put a clipper at the end just to kind of rein things in. Then we have some gentle EQing to manage the sub bass, and oh shit, that's something else I didn't mention. Because it's okay. Anyways, and then a very gentle roll off in the highs to kind of because again, OTT is very good at brightening things. Yeah, about compression. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know too much about how to do good compression. The funny thing is about compression, right, is that it's the saying is when it comes to pretty much all things music is just do what sounds good. But with compression, it's kind of hard to tell when you're doing something that sounds good. The funny thing is how we determine loudness, how our brains determine loudness, is kind of funny and sort of counterintuitive. It's by how long the sound is and how quickly it falls off. Right? So it's kind of funny. If you have a snap is very quick, right? But because it's very quick and falls off quick, we do perceive it as somewhat loud, but not as loud as it really is. When you get into things that have a longer peak and a faster fall off, our brain is like, wow, that was really loud. But if you had something that had a really high peak that kind of fell off kind of gently, your brain is like, oh, that was a little bit loud. When it could be completely the opposite. It's just how our brains interpret loudness. It's very weird. Very fast sounds we generally don't perceive as loud, while very long sounds we perceive as more loud than other things. So it's kind of funny, and this is compression works in that favor, right? Because you're cutting off the peakiest peaks of the audio, which is basically flattening the top, and in a sense making the loudest part of the dynamic flatter, which in our brain may perceive it as loudness. That's kind of how this whole loudness war thing works too, is that when you have just a square wave, it's perceived as loud because the volume is constant, right? So, yeah, it comes down to our brain's weird way of interpreting loudness. It's not always accurate. When it comes to compression, you have to kind of contend with that. Generally speaking, when it comes to compression, there are some just broad rules that you can follow. Like I said, I'm still kind of about compression. First of all, I usually don't use RMS because RMS is kind of sort of like an average of the audio over a span of time. Sort of. Peak compression is better. Peak compression is looking at it basically in real time. And so you're going to have the peaks that you're looking at. And you basically want to squash the loudest parts out. When I use compression, I don't use it for much in the way of changing the tone of the music. I'm using compression solely to create headroom in the music. If you have a snare, you should know that when you take a snare and you hit it, that's gonna clip the audio quite badly. But you don't need that really super high peak. You can kind of roll that peak off a little bit, and it'll still sound like a snare, right? So, generally, what I'm trying to do is roll that off, so that way I still get this 2 decibels or whatever headroom up here without dramatically changing the sound profile. That's what I should say, the sound profile. There is the whole, dynamics thing. I just don't worry about it too much. There are going to be some people who are, way too anal retentive about dynamics in music. There are also the people who, talk about, back in my day, there was no such thing as the loudness war. I don't give a shit about the loudness war. I give a shit about music that sounds good. And sometimes I need more headroom to make my music sound good. So that's what I use compression for. It's just to get more headroom in the music. And in which case, the general rules to follow is surprisingly not what you see here. This is very, very gentle compression. Okay, that gentle compression is because this is on one of my more jazzier mixes. Because those are the drums. But we do have this right here. So this is also a compressor. This is a different compressor. This is Big Blue compressor. It's by 1112 dB. It is not a free compressor. It's kind of funny. I have owned Big Blue compressor for a very long time. I think it was one of the very, very first VSTs I ever purchased. And I used it as my main compressor for a long time until I started just relying more on M compressor, and then used M compressor completely, basically replaced Big Blue compressor. But it's kind of funny. Recently, I've kind of fallen back in love with Big Blue compressor for sort of the opposite of what I'm talking about now, as it does actually create a very nice, it sonically enhances the sound as it compresses it, and that's because it has some analog modeling going on in there. I really like this choke knob here, where basically back in analog compressors is when it would run the sound through the tube in order to compress it. If the sound was too hot, it would kind of, I don't know the fucking physics of it because I've never owned a proper tube compressor, but basically it would cause the tube to kind of choke and kind of create this saturated effect in the audio. So Big Blue Compressor has this choke knob here. So in addition with the drive knob, in addition to the drive knob and with the choke knob, you can create some very subtle but very nice warmth to some audio. So I've fallen back in love with Big Blue Compressor only recently, but I still use it as a pretty standard compressor, as mostly just to handle headroom in music. And so what we can see here, how I've used this, is first of all, lickety split, super fast attack. As low as the attack will go. I want it, as soon as it hears any sound, it is pushing that sound down. Second, the release generally is around 50 milliseconds. Plus or minus 10 milliseconds. And then basically what I shoot for is no more than minus 5 decibels, except for some extreme cases, like there might be drum fills that are overly rambunctious drum fills that can be the exception. But I would say on average throughout the course of the song, never more than minus 5 decibel on the gain reduction. And depending on how you want to control the peaks is what you'll want to set the ratio to, because the ratio is how much it's going to roll that peak off. I really like M compressor here for this because it gives you this graph, so it really helps visualize how things are being compressed. And let me take a pause because I see Mr. TNT Applecraft has said something. I have fallen so far down the rabbit hole of procrastination that I'm now watching a guy compose video game music. What up? I'm not even really composing it. I can't do that on a stream because I get way too into like talking about stuff that I never get any work done. I'm here to help Meg. The visual really helps. Yeah, and I think this is one reason why I started using N compressor for such a long time, and only why recently. Like I've started feeling more confident with my my compression skills, that I don't need to rely on the visualization quite as much when I use Big Blue Compressor. So I think that's another reason why I've started using Big Blue Compressor a lot more recently. But anyways, you can see, let's just apply a new instance of M compressor so I can play around with this. So you get the graph. So this red line indicates where the threshold is. So anytime the audio passes this red line, this is how much gain reduction is happening. So right now we're at basically a 2-to-1. Let's just set it to 2. So there we go. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. So you can see how much it's rolling off the gain. So here is the actual gain itself. So we have 0 decibel at the top, -6, -12, -18, 24, 36, and then silence down there. And then this is the amount of gain reduction. Or wait, what is fucking going on here? I don't fucking know. Honestly, I mostly just pay attention to this one down here, the x-axis. Anyways, so let's like loop the drums for a moment, right? And we'll just listen to those. So you can see this is where the audio is, this black bar. And if we change the RMS, we can see how that changes to peak. Not very much because it's pretty quiet. Let me tell you what, let's boost the input a little bit, like +6. So if we change the RMS, you can see how it becomes more like an average of the audio over time. Technically, RMS stands for root mean square. I'm not much of a math nerd to understand what root mean square actually means, but essentially it works like an average. So, but generally I set it to a peak. And we can see how it's much more reactive as a peak. And this is what I mostly want to control anyways. Because we don't want it to peak too hard. As we can see, oh, you can't see it. There we go. As you can see, we're clipping right now. So, so basically what I'd want to do is try to handle these peaks right here. I gotta turn this down to my headphones because I feel like I have to shout. So we have our threshold, which is basically where the compressor is going to start reacting. So I'll start pulling this down until we start seeing it react a little bit. Like I said, we really don't want it to compress more than -5, so I'm going to maybe pull it down a little bit more. Maybe shoot for like a -3 or something. Yeah, that's kind of good. And I like to use whole numbers and even numbers if I can, so let's set it to -20. -21 might have been better, but it doesn't matter. This is just OCD. Obviously, there's no reason to set it to exactly -20 or exactly -21, but the 0.10 of a decibel is not going to make much of a difference, so I'd rather prefer to use whole numbers, with the rare exception of a 0.5 thrown in there. So it's -21. More reactive there. But then the ratio is how much it's going to decrease, how much it's going to roll off that peak here. Numbers are gross unless it's a 5. You're gonna have to give that up a little bit. Sometimes you might have to use a 21 or a 23 in there. So like if we slam this up to 22, basically, if we slam this up to 20 to the 20 to 1 ratio, basically the volume is never going to exceed past this threshold, pretty much. It's a brick wall, is what we call it. Now, technically, that's not entirely true. You will get a few peaks that may actually go a little bit past. You can see that it still goes up to like here or something. So it's not a perfect brick wall. But anyways, it does... No, it really does happen where I can't deny that 3 so anyways, so obviously the ratio is how much gain reduction is happening after it crosses the threshold. So you can see here too how much gain reduction is happening, because obviously the higher the ratio, the more it's going to have to reduce the gain once it passes that threshold. So if we set this back to like -2, we can see that generally it's kind of like right about here. It would say roughly, oh, you can see down here actually, it's pretty close to -3 gain reduction with the drum fill, the pretty crazy drum fill there at the end, kind of pushing it over the edge. But if we push this ratio up to 20, we're now getting almost nearly an additional decibel in gain reduction happening at -3, nearly -4 decibel. So, yeah, so really, this is gonna, your ratio is really gonna affect the dynamics the most. So I would just set the threshold to roughly about where it starts reacting to -3 or something. And then adjust the ratio from there on how much you want to control the overall peak. So normally I use somewhere between a 2 to 1 to 5 to 1 ratio, and a 6 to 1 on an occasion if I really trying to go nuclear. The only mixing I've ever done with drums was just slapping Maximus and reverb on it. Fair enough. So, the other thing is, too, also, it's not reacting very fast because the attack is actually relatively slow. 10 milliseconds is pretty slow, especially when it comes to drums. Maybe for other instruments, you might want a slower attack, but for drums, I generally like basically instant attack. So, if we turn this attack way down, we're going to see that this is going to become way more reactive, right? So there we go. Now we're getting a -7 decibel cut. So we're going to need to turn this up quite a lot. So let's set this back to 2 to 1. There we go. And we want to see right about where it's getting -3. That's pretty close. Maybe I could, since we're not using whole numbers yet, let's do a -14. There we go. We're getting pretty close to -3. And then maybe I would want to control the ratio. Maybe this feels more like a 3 to 1 kind of thing. There we go. That looks good. Generally speaking, you can get kind of an, I don't know how to describe it other than like the audio feeling choked. It's kind of that screaming effect that I was talking about earlier. It's more subtle when you just are using downward compression at you know, at numbers like this, at you know, basically a maximum of -5 decibels, you really don't hear much of that screaming effect that happens. Choked audio is what I call it. But you do still get a little bit of it. To kind of help smooth that out, to kind of reduce that effect, is using a knee, which is basically the gradient at which it starts applying the ratio. So it'll apply the ratio more gently. Instead of instantly applying the gain reduction from the ratio right away, it kind of eases into it a little bit. So I usually like to use a knee of around just the default 25%. Sometimes I'll reduce it down to like a 20 or 15%, depending on my mood, really. I don't know. There's not much reason behind it. And then whenever I sometimes occasionally want to create a brick wall to completely reduce the chances of any spurious peaks breaking through, in my brick wall compression, I will, of course, have the ratio set to 20, but I don't really want it to slam into that 20-to-1 ratio right away, in which case I'll use a very, very gentle knee. It's somewhere like 50 to 100% on the knee. So you get this very, very gentle compression that goes into it. So, but that's really for brick wall limiting, or brick wall compression, and is a little bit more rare. I might do that on some drum tracks. Did I do it on this one? Because I do have the extra compression here. No, I didn't. I may do that on some drum tracks, but it is pretty rare, but still worth keeping in mind. The generally speaking, when it comes to compression, is basically get it until you're at about -3 decibel, and then move the ratio until you reach it about -5. With a fast attack, about 50 millisecond release time, and peak compression, no RMS. So that's kind of a rough idea behind compression. Yeah. I'll remove that. So I think that just about covers how to do compression. Like I said, I think the main takeaway when it comes to compression is just to get the headroom. It's to reduce peaks. There are two things that I like to do. I forgot to bring this up. Is have some sort of waveform viewer. I don't actually have a waveform viewer plugin. I used to a long time ago. I don't know. I must have deleted or something. I don't know where it is. But anyways, I use G-Clipper because it has a waveform viewer built into it here. So we can see the waveform here, and you can even zoom in a little bit. There we go. So we can zoom in and we can look at the waveform a little bit more clearly. So I like to put a waveform viewer at the end, and then we can go to compression. And now we can actually visualize the effects of our compression. Let's go ahead and match these. So right now we can see there's all these peaks that are coming off of it. First of all, so we don't have to zoom in so much. Let's go ahead and add back that +6 decibels to it. We can zoom out and get a little bit more room. So we can now really see those peaks quite well. So then next, let's set the RMS to peak, the attack to 0, set the knee to soft, and we can already A/B it. We can see where the peaks are now. If we disable it, it's not going to show much of a change, but there should be a small change. That was good. That was a... Oh! Of course. This is a bad example, because it also adds 6 decibel. Okay, let's fix that. Let's add the 6 decibel somewhere else. Here. There we go. Okay, so the 6 decibel have been added in. And now when we disable it... Oh, that was the input. God damn it. We won 6 decibel on the output. There we go. Alright, we got it right now. So, there is some compression happening. We can turn it off. You can see some minor changes in the output, but not so much. So again, we're gonna move this threshold down until we get to about -3. Well, thank you for joining, TNT Applecraft. So we'll set that at about like -15. Sure, -15. That's about right. And set this to a 3. Now we can see the waveform that's being output. So if we disable it now, we can see how those peaks are really quite crazy compared to before. We have all these spurious peaks that are happening. But when we enable it, those spurious peaks are much more manageable. And by doing that, we have a lot more headroom to work with. And this is the main thing that I'm looking for when I use compression. I'm not really looking to change the sound profile too much sonically. I know I was just talking about Big Blue Compressor and how it does add a very nice warm saturation to the sound. But that's a very special use case. Mostly what I'm looking for when I'm using compression is just to control the headroom itself. So, there we go. Let's see, what did you say? I think in most of what I do, drums and bass sections are majority what I need it for. Yeah, it depends on the bass, really. When it comes to bass, if this is still on in 4 hours, I shall come back. This is not going to be on in 4 hours, I can promise you that. I sure hope it's not on in 4 hours. Anyways, so yeah, bass is kind of one of the areas. It depends on the type of bass you're using. If we're talking like a, like a fingered bass, you can kind of get some pretty gnarly attack on the fingers. Like you hear some click with the strings. In which case, yeah, you'd probably want to apply some compression. The same way as drums are, because it's more of a percussive kind of sound than an instrument kind of sound. So in which case, you kind of apply the same type of compression to the bass. Now, if you're talking about the bass sound itself, in which case you may start wanting to try to use RMS compression, and in which case I'm useless when it comes to that kind of stuff. I don't really use RMS that much. Again, it's about gain reduction. So I don't know. I would still probably shoot for like a -3, maybe -5 gain reduction with RMS. I'd use it relatively slow. Yeah, maybe like a 3. I think a 3 would be pretty good. When it comes to bass, do we have a... I don't think this song has a bass. So I can't actually show that. I may have to switch back to the other song. Remind me not to save any of these changes. Viola, cello... mono leads, bit arp. There's not a bass in this. There is a bass in this one. So where's the bass? Here we go. Let's go here where it's longer. Yeah. It's quite quiet in my headphones. It seems pretty quiet for you as well. I've turned it down quite a lot here. It's like -5. If I was smart, I would have done that, but I didn't. So we're going to do the same thing here. So I have my compressor, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply G-clip. I'm not using G-clip to clip the audio. I'm using the G-clip just to view the waveform. And we'll bring this up. There we go. So we can look at the waveform. I said, maybe a 3 millisecond RMS. Once again, apply a soft knee. I'm feeling like I want a nice round 20% on that for no reason. Probably a 3-to-1 on it. The attack on this, on the base, is already relatively slow, so I'm just gonna set that to like 1 millisecond. And the release is probably fine at 50, honestly. So yeah, maybe set that at like -19, and that's gonna get us... See, here's the thing. This is why I normally don't apply compression, is because on instruments like this, because the instrument kind of tends to have a constant volume, you wind up getting just constant compression, which is basically effectively constant gain reduction. It is variable gain reduction, but I just don't know if it's really worth it. To me, just playing around with just the general gain is good enough for me, so I don't normally play around with this kind of compression that much. Again, it's not really doing much for headroom, so it's just not the way that I use compression. I'm sure there are some EDM artists who probably know how to use compression like this a little bit better to make the most out of it. One thing I am noticing, I don't know if this is an artifact, if this is actually like part of the instrument itself, or if this is an artifact of the compression, but I'm noticing some spurious peaks in the waveform that I didn't see before. If I turn that off, do we have those still? No, I'm not seeing them. So I'm not sure why, but somehow this type of compression has also introduced some like spurious peaks in the audio as well, which may sound like clicking. Like here you can see there's one. This one's not so bad, but it's still there, and this one as well. If we set it to peak, what would happen? It's much more aggressive with the compression, so we don't really get those spurious peaks so much. We still get them occasionally. Maybe it has to do with the attack. So if we just set it to instant. Ah, they're gone. But at this point, it's almost like a near constant volume reduction, at which point you might as well just use the gain and turn it down. So, yeah. I guess that's the one thing with RMS, is you kind of get more of a variable gain reduction with it. In which case, when you use that, is that you will have the louder parts that get turned down, but then some of the quieter parts will stay at their volume, which is kind of where you get that variable gain reduction. So that would really help contribute to the screaming choked effect that I talked about before, which if you want to accomplish the screaming choke effect, just use OTT and turn OTT up to 100%. And if it's still not choked enough for you, then add another layer of OTT. Like, here we go. There we go. Nice and choked out. How about some more OTT? How about some more OTT? You know what? We didn't turn the upward up enough. There we go. Oh, you get some weird artifacts in there. There's like this little like there's like almost like a synthesized snap at the end. Or it's like a shaker almost. Where did that come from? So, anyways. Yeah, Anyways, I hope. Sorry, the compression stuff is kind of funnily enough. It's like it's so mysterious and complicated, and is very important, and yet at the same time, almost kind of makes the least difference in the overall timbre of the mix. You know, the sonic profile of the mix is not really changed too much by good compression. It just helps things be louder, and by allowing things to be louder, it can make it more present in the mix, bring it more forward in front of the stage. That's always one thing that you should think about, which I'm sure as someone who works on orchestra, you probably think about this quite a lot, is when you're mixing music, you kind of think of it like a stage. And so you're going to have, of course, your left and your right, but you also have your forward and your back. And so basically you can think of your left and right is obviously your panning. That's pretty clear. But when you want your forward and back, to bring things forward, you use compression, and to bring things back, you use a lot of reverb. So with compression and reverb is the forward and back. So yeah, so that's another way that you can use compression, is if you want to bring a specific instrument forward, is you will compress it so that way it seems louder. And when it seems louder, and you get kind of more when you, because that's the thing with compression, is because you make it louder, the lower, quieter details are more easier to hear. And when you can hear things more easily, it's kind of like when you are closer. Like right now, we can do this right now. If I move far away from the microphone, you know, my voice doesn't, you don't catch some of the more nuanced things in my voice. Some of the kind of, I don't know, I guess you could say graveliness of it. But of course, if I move closer to the microphone to the point where I'm like basically right up next to it, you can hear quite a lot of different details in the voice. So this is almost like it technically is compression, because I have compression on the my microphone input actually. So, but yeah, you can tell how that by coming closer, you hear more details. So obviously that's because I'm louder. So when you compress something, you're making that thing louder and more present. So you're hearing there's more details, and which creates the closeness effect. So yeah, compression helps bring things forward on the stage, while reverb helps things feel farther away. Pre-delay on reverb helps with that as well. Yes. Surprisingly, I don't play around with pre-delay too much with my reverb. I like a lot of the presets that come with my reverb. It's funny, man. This is a whole rant of its own. So I use Redline Reverb, which is also by 1112 Decibel. Softworks or whatever they're called, 1112 Decibel. They're the same people who did the Big Blue compressor. I bought, for 100% for sure, I bought Redline Reverb first. This was my very first commercial plugin that I purchased. And boy, have I gotten my money out of it. Because, I don't know, I bought this like way early on when I was just getting into like computer music production. I've been doing this for 12 years, 13 years. I don't know. I stopped counting, I don't know, basically at 10 years. I think I'm at 12 years. So, you know, way early on in my 12 years, I bought this plugin. And it's been all reliable, all faithful for the longest time. So much so, like, I've tried so many different reverbs. I have, like, one of the things is, you know, I talked about quite frequently that I attended KVR Audio, which is a old-fashioned forum, just like the RPG Maker web forum. And, except it's about VST plugins. And all the time, folks on there just raved about how good the Valhalla Reverb plugins were. And I finally got them. And I don't like them. And I noticed this in a lot of different reverb plugins that I have actually tested. Is there's this, I don't know how to describe it other than like the sound with a reverb pad underneath. they don't sound like they occupy the same space. It's just like someone put a really cool reverb pad of the same sound in a room somewhere else. They don't sound connected. They're not in the same place with the same sound bouncing around in the room. I don't know how else to describe it other than that. They feel so disconnected from each other. Like, let's go to my drums. Or my drums. Not on this. Let's go to, this is where it's going to sound best. Because I will admit that, like, the Valhalla reverb stuff sounds good in some scenarios, but, like, drums is one of those areas where I just don't think it sounds good at all. So we'll go to my drums, and I have my wooden church preset on here. I don't know if I'm missing something, but I don't like Valhalla's stuff. And this is the thing, right? From my experience, anytime I've seen musicians recommending stuff, musicians don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And I guess that goes to me too. I don't know why Valhalla is good, so I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But, like, my piece of shit Akai little MIDI keyboard thing here, I hate this fucking thing. And this was highly recommended by a lot of musicians. I don't know why. This thing is a piece of shit. I hate these keys. These keys feel like garbage. I feel like I'm pushing down on a wet sponge. And they're, like, so narrow. And the edges are so hard, like my thumb. It feels like it cuts into my thumb. I hate this piece of shit. Anyways, oh, by the way, it's difficult to properly use this piece of shit unless you fucking give them your email and, you know, stuff like that. Of course, you have to register it and give them your personal information because we live in the year fucking 2020 and everyone wants your personal information. Why can't I just buy a piece of hardware and use it? Why do I have to register my garbage with your fucking website? Anyways, sorry, mini rant. Musicians seem to not know what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to stuff. I think that's because it has to do with these things, and these things are just unreliable pieces of garbage that God has blessed us with. Everyone hears things completely differently. Where you have to sign up to get a coupon for milk 2023. Yes. Anyways, so let's listen. I'm going to really crank up the reverb on this. I would not turn it up this high, but I just want you to hear the nuance in the reverb and how it feels like the drums are actually occupying this wooden church space, right? So we're going to knock it up to 50%, right? Right? They just feel like you are in that room. Like, those drums are in that room, and you have the sounds just bouncing around the room, all in there. You're hearing all those reflections, and it all feels like it's in the same space. Now, I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to apply Valhalla Vintage Verb, because I think that's going to be the most accurate to kind of emulate that sort of sound. And let's pick chamber, large chamber, and we'll set it to 50% as well. This one's okay. I'm still kind of getting this, I don't know, it doesn't feel as connected. Like here especially, okay, especially when it comes to like the big spacey reverbs, things really start to feel quite disconnected from the actual audio. It just feels like there's been a reverb pad layered underneath the drums, and I'm hearing it here. It just doesn't feel like it's in the same space together. It feels like the drums exist here, and then someone put some a pad emulating these drums with a bunch of reverb on it over here. It's not in the same space together. Like, if we were to go back here, go to like one of the really big sounds I wouldn't use. Yeah, right? Okay, so if you hear it too, I don't think I'm completely crazy. If we go to one of like the really big sounds, like Lush Universe, this is like super good for making pads and stuff. But even when it comes to making pads, like it still feels like these drums are playing in this Lush universe. And then we'll switch over to this one. I don't know. Part of me right now is almost kind of questioning myself, because like it's not as obvious. Maybe it was it is a little bit. I'm still noticing it a little bit. I think vintage verb is better than plate. I think the plate one definitely kind of... Sorry, that's at 100%. I don't know. Part of me right now is questioning myself. I don't hear it as clearly. I definitely know for sure. There was definitely one time when I put these together and I was definitely hearing that, like, it felt like an effect. It's the only way I can put it. It felt like an effect. It didn't feel like it occupied a space. It felt like someone applied a reverb effect, which is technically what it is, but that's not how it's supposed to feel. It's supposed to feel like it's occupying a space. Anyways, maybe I'm a little bit crazy. Again, this comes back to what I said. Musicians don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Yeah. One of the other reverbs I tried was it's Melda's paid for compressor. I gave the demo a try because so here's the thing. I kind of went on a reverb binge because of what I said. Is I've been using Redline reverb for such a long time. I felt like I just needed a change in sound, right? Because I am so familiar with all of the sounds in Redline reverb. I was like, I don't know, I'm ready for a change. I've been using the same damn thing for such a long time. And that was the only reason. I'm still happy with Redline reverb. It's just I kind of wanted a change in sound, that's all. So I kind of went on a binge of different reverbs, and I tried the demo for Melda's Turbo Reverb, which is like their big super special reverb, and it definitely for sure felt like an effect and less like making the instrument occupy a space. Yeah, you feel like you're missing out or settling, but sometimes you're not. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm happy with Redline reverb. I still kind of have that desire for something a little bit more modern and something that maybe has a change in its sound profile. But I'm kind of worried because I've tried different reverbs and all of them kind of feel like they feel like an effect. They don't feel like the instrument is existing inside a space. In fact, so much so, recently, 1112 DB released Redline Reverb 2, and I can upgrade to Redline Reverb 2 for like just $20. Pretty cheap. But I kind of refuse to do it because I'm scared that the new version of it may have an altered sound profile, and I'm very happy with what's here. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to replace this, how it sounds. Oh. What, out of curiosity, what reverb do you use? I said delete, go away. I don't want to see you anymore. There. I wonder if I still have them. For a while I do still have them. For a while I used Tau Reverb 2 and 3. I actually prefer 2 more than 3. Both of these are free plugins. I don't even know if they are still supported. Again, these are very, very old. Out of curiosity, I just want to check. Should check in on GVST as well. Oh, Tau Reverb. Yep, still here. You've used Tau. Okay, well, there we go. Tau Reverb 2 and 3. I use these for quite a while. I use Tau Reverb 2 the most because, again, I think it was good at creating like very pad-like ethereal sounds, but I also think well, actually, honestly, I don't know. I hadn't heard that effect that I was talking about of like two separate entities. The basically reverb sounding like an effect. I hadn't heard that until recently. I don't know if I've just become more sensitive to it or if it was just those plugins. Let's give it a try. A little bit. I hear it a little bit, but it's not as bad as Valhalla. Yeah, and that may just be because I'm really keen from using Redline Reverb for so long. Maybe I'm just really keen on its signature sound that maybe it's just me just changes. I don't like them. I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit of that. Anyways, glad to know that they're still around. Let's check in on GVST and make sure they're still around too. I think so. Yeah. Yeah, GVST is still here. Oh, good to know. I don't know if they've updated any of these things. This site feels fucking ancient. Because this is the other thing is that I really don't like updating my software. I know this sounds crazy. Like, the only thing that I really update is Windows, and that's only because Windows Update forces me to. And, of course, games, because usually it's very rare for a game to break with an update. Most of the time, games actually get better with updates. However, from my experience with any other piece of software, things just tend to get worse the more you update them. I used to love software like CCleaner, and it's like the more you updated CCleaner, the more it just became bloatware. So yeah, I don't like updating software, so I've like had a download package for my plugins that I just saved into like a folder. And so whenever I like change computers or need to whatever, if I have to reinstall Windows for whatever reason, this is maybe happened only like twice in my entire life. There's like one time I built my new computer, my current one, and maybe one time I had to reinstall Windows. It's a rare event, but either way, I just have a folder on an external drive of like all of my plugins and stuff, and that way I don't have to go searching for them. Especially because you have some of these plugins are a lot of the plugins I use are free plugins, and those are usually just like RPG Maker plugin developers are built by hobbyists who this is not their full-time job, and so because it's not their full-time job, they move on to other things. Life gets them caught up in whatever else, and so they can't support their plugin, and eventually they just stop paying for their domain, and then oh no, their plugins are gone forever because they're not part of that scene anymore. So yeah, and so I just keep an archive of all the plugins that I use, and I just keep installing those, and so they could be versions and versions old. I don't know. I don't update them. If they work, there's no reason to update them. So anyways, so somehow we've managed quite a lot. Same, my husband is a network engineer, so I don't know what the hell he did, but there's a legit server where all my stuff is, and my computer talks to... so you have like a NAS. So NAS is network attached storage. So yeah, I would love to get a NAS set up, but I don't have a NAS set up. So, but cool. Yeah. I recall. I'm glad. Yeah, anyways, I never did network stuff. I mean, the closest I did was I installed internet as a cable guy back when I lived in America. That was my job. I was the cable guy. But I never really did much with networking, but I do enjoy working on computers. So I know some stuff. Anyways, do you have any other questions? I'd like to make sure that I can answer those, since that's what the point of this stream is. If not, I mean, we've managed to go a full 3 hours, which is actually kind of longer than I expected. But it's been fun. I'm egotistical. It's kind of weird. Like, we can have a heart-to-heart moment here. Am I out of beer? No, not out of beer, thank God. Let's have a heart-to-heart. Let's just real talk. I kind of mentioned this, I think, I posted very lengthy responses on the forum talking about this, but, I will say this, as someone who has been self-taught a lot of this stuff, there's something that you can appreciate about having, like, formal education. Formal education teaches you the right ways of doing things. And so with that right way of doing things, and also a comprehensive education, like the steps in between, I think it's easier to build up confidence in your skills. Doesn't mean you know more. You might learn more faster, but at the end of the education, it's kind of up to the person to continue their learning, and so they may stagnate, they may not, but they may generally come out of that education feeling more confident in their abilities. I do think, considering how long I have done music and how little recognition I have received from my music over the years, that lacking the formal education, I've kind of always felt a little bit insecure about my music, because it's like, I know it's sort of a fallacy to assume that just because you put in a lot of work and you know what you're doing when it comes to your music, or anything, your art, whatever, that you would get recognition. That's obviously a fallacy. That's not how the world works. But that's also not how our brains work, Um, despite being aware of that, there's still part of me. It's like, well, I've been doing this for 12 fucking years, and when I poured heart and soul into my album, and I probably spent about $1,000 paying for musicians and artwork, and just getting everything done for the album. And at the end of the day, my take home for the album was, enough to buy a couple of bags of groceries. You kind of stop to wonder. It's like, I'm not looking to be Taylor Swift. I'm not looking to be fucking Linkin Park. I'm just kind of wish I made my $1,000 back at least. So, you get that kind of stuff, and you just kind of, it's like, I'm not looking to be famous, I'm not looking to be well known, but I just kind of wish there was some people who appreciated my music. And because I never felt like I got that, it kind of creates this insecurity. It's like, well, maybe I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, However, that was kind of with my previous album. I think when it comes to my previous album, I understand why it really doesn't have much appeal. It's very noisy music. Like this right here. It's sort of a long song, and very relentless. So it kind of starts to wear itself out thin by the end. I will admit that. Part of it is, however, maybe there's a lot going on with the music as well. And I think it's fairly subtle stuff that maybe people just don't realize. So when you're missing the subtle stuff, it just sounds like it's just repeating the same thing over and over. Anyways, that's kind of besides the point. I can appreciate the music because the lyrics are meaningful to me. I think the lyrics are actually pretty good, and I enjoyed making it, but I also kind of understand why it wasn't very popular. It was kind of when I started doing the soundtrack to my game currently, and doing these streams, and between whenever I take a toilet break or whatever, I'd play the soundtrack, and I was surprised at the number of people who were like, "Whoa, that's a really cool song." Or even sometimes I would be playing a game that has like a really annoying soundtrack, and people would be like, "Can we just please turn on the fiddle soundtrack instead?" And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I feel sorry for the person who wrote the soundtrack that they don't want the annoying soundtrack for. But I also feel it's like, people like my music. I definitely get that. I might get one comment or download. I see more people listen, so sometimes I do get curious what they're thinking too. The thing is I don't even really get that many listens. At least I didn't. I'm very happy with again, Fiddle soundtrack is doing really well. I don't know about the game. I feel like there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the game, but it is also RPG Maker and kind of looks RPG Maker at the end of the day, so I kind of feel like it's not going to have the super great appeal, but if there's anything that it's doing right, I do feel like it's the music. Let's see, let me switch to the account where I hope that's not going to fuck with the live stream. It shouldn't. But switch to the account where I post music. Yeah, and here, switch cameras. So a lot of the stuff is unlisted, but like here's the soundtrack preview that I had posted on my channel where I post music. And of course, it's not a lot. When we're talking, YouTube numbers, obviously there are channels that get millions of views, if not, tens of millions of views. But still, I'm like 218. I'm pretty happy with that. If I'm being honest. And all the comments are pretty positive. There's only 3, but 14 likes. Like I'm pretty happy with this turnout on that. So it's like it makes me feel like my previous stuff, my noisy industrial type of music, it's hard to find an appeal. But I'm glad to know that at least my game's soundtrack music is, I feel like, at least getting the recognition that I want. It makes it feel like, oh, I do know what I'm talking about. I do know what I'm doing. Most of the time. Sometimes. Let's see. Like obviously the song that we listened to today, one of my favorites. Honestly, what I would call the whole like last act of the soundtrack, I just think is so fucking cool, man. Let's see. I just started my YouTube page actually, and I'm actually a little surprised it's gotten this many views so far. Good surprise. Yeah. And the Nerd Mansion says, I'm always looking for music. Your music just needs to be more visible. Is it on Itch, Steam, everywhere? It's on YouTube. And my previous album was distributed everywhere because I used DistroKid. DistroKid is like it's not a label, but it's a distribution service for musicians. Basically, you pay them and you give them your music, and they will put your music everywhere. So it was on Spotify. There's a one note. I don't think it's. I think one song is no longer on Spotify. That's "Believe," the title song. So, Believe is actually a cover of the Chemical Brothers. Chemical Brothers, Believe. I can only play a small section of this because it's going to get content ID'd. There you go. So, it's actually a cover of Believe, and technically you have to go through like all these rights stuff, and like DistroKid, like they're cover music is such a weird, it's just like a weird space. Like you're legally allowed to do it, you're legally allowed to make cover music, and sometimes you're legally allowed to distribute it. I don't know, things get all sorts of funny with cover music. DistroKid's policy is basically you need to have a license for cover music, and if you don't have it, then you have to like, they'll get the license for you. They have like some lawyers that they're partnered with that'll get the license, but you have to pay the lawyers for like a yearly renewal of it. And it's like, I don't earn any money from my music at all, and I'm not going to pay $20 a year. I know it's not a lot, but I'm not going to pay $20 a year for one song that no one is going to listen to on Spotify. Also, I hate Spotify. I'm going to like soapbox right here. You'll hear it from every musician. Like, Spotify doesn't pay musicians. Spotify is a terrible place to listen to music. If you listen there, that's fine. But you should at least be aware when you listen on Spotify that the only musicians that are earning any money off of Spotify are like the big name musicians. If you listen to me on Spotify, I promise you, I'll never see any money out of that ever. Zero. So it's like, I don't know. I don't have to pay for the license stuff on Bandcamp. There's no problem with it there. I've been in contact with the Chemical Brothers, and it's fine, right? Um, Technically, it's not their song because the studio, the label is the one that owns it, but like they don't have a problem with it. So it's so incredibly vastly different than the original song that it's. Anyways, I don't need to sit here and defend it. Point is, it's just lost shit. And so it doesn't exist on Spotify. That one song. Point is, everything else, all the rest of my music, the whole album is on Spotify. Tracks 2, 3, 4, and 5 are on Spotify. You can listen to it basically anywhere. I don't know anyone who uploads their music on Itch unless it's like a resource pack. And my music is not a resource pack. You can use it in your game if it's free. If you want to license my music for your commercial game, we can talk about it. I'm open to it. And I'll be sure to give a generous license because I don't want you to be caught up in the same license bullshit that, like I said, I didn't want to renew the license for Believe, which is why it doesn't exist on Spotify. Like I wouldn't get you caught up in something like that. Probably just like, I don't know, pay me $50 and then you have a lifetime license to use the song in your game, or I don't know, something like that. I don't know. But yeah, so it's on Bandcamp. I upload it on YouTube. I don't know. That's the kind of thing with music. This is the other thing, right? When it came to game dev stuff, it's surprising. It's surprising how easy it is to market games. This is a whole topic. This is a whole rant that I would love to like see some numbers and research on, or not numbers, but definitely research on, because I think there's a whole psychological thing that's here. Music is everywhere, and yet is so fucking valueless. Let's not beat around the bush. Anyone can make music. It's there's almost parity here between the music industry now and RPG Maker games. Right? Anyone can pirate a copy of FL Studio and start making beats today. And there are so many tools out there that make it easy for you. I've talked a lot of complicated stuff here. Guess what? There are a lot of tools out there that you won't ever have to touch any of this complicated stuff. Your stuff will sound like it's from a can and will probably be lacking some of the control and depth and artistic part of it. But hey, if you just want to make beats, sure, use those tools. And because anyone can make music, you have things like fucking Spotify. I hate Spotify. Not only does it not pay musicians, but basically you pay a few bucks a month and you have access to literally every song on the planet. There's a few exceptions because of licensing and stuff like that, but like basically for a few bucks you can listen to everything. And as a result, no one wants to buy music anymore. Like, can you believe even digital downloads of music are falling because people would just rather stream music? Music is so valueless now that no one cares about music. The only people that care about music are like the people who care about big superstars. Again, to use Taylor Swift. And the thing is people don't even give a shit about her music. They give a shit about her. It's about the person. Sorry, this is a really cynical take. Like, they don't actually care about her music. I honestly, Taylor Swift is such a big deal. I legitimately tried my best to get into her music. I have tried to appreciate pop music. I've really tried. I don't want to be a cynical music snob, because I also think music snobs don't do the music industry any favors either. I have tried, but honestly, it's boring. It's boring, just like a lot of the pop music. And I think the only reason why a lot of pop musicians are popular and why people care about it is because it's the person that is marketed and put in front of them. It's very rarely about the music. There are some exceptions, okay? There are some exceptions. But very rarely is it really about the music. It's more about the personality. And not even the real personality, because it's not even about the real personality, because the personality that they present is heavily controlled. It's not who they really are. You don't even really know those people. So, anyways, what I was saying is that, sorry, I've gone off on a long rant of a tangent because I feel quite cynical with music, and I try not to. But I got off on this rant because I was talking about how, because music is so valueless, it is impossible to market it. There's no way to get anyone hyped up about music. I mean, you tell me, when was the last time you saw like a hype trailer about a new drop, a new album drop? Like, you don't see it. No one cares. You might see it with movies, you see it with games. Like, there are huge amounts of hype and value behind these things. Like, people are eager to spend their money on these things. And when there's a big event that's happening with them, people talk about it. And because they talk about it, that's another source of marketing that it just kind of, it's a positive feedback loop. People are talking about it, so the company does more marketing. The marketing makes more people talk about it, and so they do more marketing, and so on and so forth. And you build this huge hype bubble up, and everyone knows about the new fucking Marvel movie that's coming out. And when it comes to games, it's especially true here. Gamers are rabid. It is crazy how much I have seen, like, it is so much easier to market games, right? I'm not saying it's easy to be successful, but even to start reaching an audience from zero is so much easier to do with games, because people are interested in games. They're interested in the new experience. There is value in games, and so people are looking for that thing. And when people are looking for it, it's easy to market towards them. How do you market music towards people? There's nothing visual. I mean, you have the album art, but like, I don't know. It's valueless. They'll listen to it on Spotify for basically free. So, I don't know. I don't know. My point is, basically, I don't know how to market music. I don't know if I really know how to market games, but I know how to market games more than I know how to market music. I've talked about this before on my streams. These streams are marketing. And believe it or not, I used to do music streams like I did today on a regular. You can go back into my back catalog from like 3 years ago on this YouTube channel, and you'll find music production streams. And no one gave a shit. No one joined those streams. And I had no one to like share it with. Like, I talked about being part of KVR, a forum there, and I often shared my music and stuff. It's so funny that a music forum about music production and music plugins, they have a dedicated music cafe section, right? Which is the same thing as like the completed game section on the RPG Maker web forums, where people just post their completed music in the music cafe. And no one used that forum. The only people that used that forum were the people who were posting their music. No one actually went to that part of the forum to listen to music. This is something game devs, RPG Maker devs, really appreciate that you have this. When you post a game, whether it's in the in-game or in development forum or completed game section or commercial game section, doesn't matter where, you will get a response. You will likely get one response, maybe 2 responses. You'll get some people who will go in there and like pick apart your game and give you detailed feedback. This is amazing. And people should really appreciate that, because like, I posted my stuff on the forums, and my music, and no one gave a shit. No one uses the music cafe forum to listen to music. It's just for posting your music there to drown in the sea of other people's music. Sorry, I've been ranting. I've missed your past two messages. Yes, I do like some pop music, but it's usually the whole act that really makes some artists. A lot of the music is turning into a good. Yes. Yeah, my game music gets way more views than my music to just listen to. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Music is worthless now. I see personally more prestige with game composers, with like soundtrack composers, and specifically games, because I honestly don't hear that about too many composers with movies. Like I know Hans Zimmer, and have a personal vendetta against Hans Zimmer. I like Hans Zimmer's stuff. I hate how basically every movie soundtrack is now Hans Zimmer. It's either Hans Zimmer directly or someone who's trying to be Hans Zimmer. And it's actually probably not them trying to be Hans Zimmer. It's probably the movie studio telling that person to be more like Hans Zimmer. If we go back to, like, you know, I was showing off my music folder and all of the OSTs that I have in there. If we went back to that, I don't think there's any movie OSTs that are in there. And if there is, there might be like one. Maybe like The Lord of the Rings or something in there. It's mostly game music and, funnily enough, anime music. Or copies of Danny Elfman and John Williams. Yeah. I don't know. The like Hollywood scores are so stale to me. Yeah, actually, that's also a whole nother rant. I really am not much of a movie watcher, if I'm being honest. And I think part of that is like anytime I think of movies, I feel so exhausted because I feel like often movies are just doing the same thing. Like Hollywood feels like the most up its ass industry ever. Like it doesn't give a shit about anything on the outside. Like Hollywood just does what Hollywood does. So, I don't know. Anyways, I am such a bone to pick with film score. Yep, thank you. I think me and you might be on the same side of this argument. um Anyways, yeah, I can go off on so many rants. This is what I think ultimately this rant within a rant within a rant. I don't know how many rabbit holes of rants have gone down. I think the whole point of all of this was eventually somewhere trying to lead me to saying that I don't really get many opportunities to like just talk about music, but I'm sure like anyone who creates stuff, anyone who's proud of what they created, wants to talk about like why they're proud of it. So, shit ton of, yeah. Um, yep. Um, I totally agree with you. Anyways, I don't get that many opportunities to just like talk about what makes my music tick, and so it's definitely one thing that I really enjoyed about this stream tonight is just getting to chat about what makes my music tick. I'm waiting for the day where I finally get to like discuss my album Believe. I'm waiting for my time on Genius. That's the name of that website, right? Where people go on there and like pretentiously speak about their lyrics. I'm ready to do that, right? Is it genius? Yeah. I want to be one of the pretentious people that go on there and talk about my song lyrics. When's my time to talk about Believe? Anyways, yeah. Oh, this is, yeah, I was also gonna briefly mention some of the like final act music. Some of my favorite. I mean, I love basically the whole soundtrack, but some of these last songs. So the song that we had listened to today, it's kind of like intended to be like the final boss music. I have the whole thing, like I can see it in my mind. Again, there's me putting the cart before the horse. Writing music for parts I have not even actually developed yet in my game, but I can't help it. Really, all three of these songs, this final act stuff, but it's also cool. Like this one. So one thing that I do in my game, there's no voice acting, but I give each character a voice. And I give them an instrument as a voice. You can actually hear this when I was doing the slideshow earlier. I used some of the sound effects in my game. So that little violin squeak right there is actually the main character's voice. And then when you progress the text, like when you change the text box to the next one, plays that little bing. Gosh, I could probably talk. No, I'm not gonna get into that. Sorry, I was about to get into that whole discussion. Anyways, this whole song uses all the different instrument voices of the NPC characters. You get this dramatic build up. Got some drums that come in later. Where is it? The little violin squeak will come in here. There it is. And then later on, all the different NPCs come in. It's so fucking cool. I love it. All of those different instrument sounds are the voices of the different NPCs in the game. Yeah, man, it's so fucking cool. And then you heard this one earlier, a few weeks, a month ago, I don't know, because I was excited about this one. Yeah, so like all three of these songs are like final act songs. Anyways, I'm pretty proud of this album. Soundtrack album. Yeah, a little bit of both. Working on the game. Can't wait to release it. I think we're pretty much winding down here. And it's actually pretty late. Nearly 2 a.m. for me. So, I don't think I have anything else to talk about. Other than maybe harassing you about... my cats are about to eat me alive. If I don't feed them. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I think I'm wrapping up. I was going to say, other than harassing you about maybe doing a song to give the community for Christmas. You know, doing that gothic song. But other than that, yeah, I think it's time for us to go. So thank you for joining, especially for such a long time. It's really amazing that you stuck around for such a long time. I hope that I was able to help you with your music production. So now, as your teacher, I expect to hear good results. I expect to see results of your learning. And of course, you know how to get in contact with me. So if you ever have questions, feel free to send me a message or whatever. Ask a question. And I'll do my best to answer it. So, anyways, take care for the rest of your day. And, yeah, that's it. All right. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.